When your mate chooses another, you're already dead. Sable Arden stood in the center of the pack circle, her hands trembling as Rowan, the man who'd promised her forever, announced he'd found his true mate. Not her, never her. In a wolf shifter society where bonds meant survival, being abandoned was a death sentence. But Sable carried a secret that made everything worse. She was pregnant. No mate, no protection, and a pack that didn't forgive weakness. What happens next will shock you. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. Let's go. The wind off the northern cliffs carried salt and the smell of pine resin. Sable Arden stood at the edge of the gathering grounds, her boots sinking into mud still soft from yesterday's rain. Around her, the Thornridge pack assembled in a loose circle. Faces she'd known her entire life, people who'd watched her grow up, who'd celebrated when Rowan Cade first claimed her as his partner 3 years ago. Now those same faces looked at her like she was already a ghost. Rowan stood across from her, shoulders broad under his leather jacket, dark hair falling into eyes that refused to meet hers. Beside him was her, Lissa Crane, a woman who'd arrived from the Southern Territories only 2 weeks ago. Blonde, delicate, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She wore Rowan's scent like a brand. "I didn't want it to be like this," Rowan said, his voice carrying across the circle. He still wouldn't look at Sable. But when the true mate bond calls, you can't ignore it. The pull. It's not something you can fight. Alpha Dane Thornridge stood at the head of the circle, arms crossed. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and gray at the temples, with a reputation for ruthlessness that kept their borders secure. His expression was unreadable. "Sable Arden," Dane said, his voice like gravel. "Do you contest this claim?" Every eye turned to her. The weight of their stares pressed against her skin. Her wolf stirred inside her, restless and furious, but Sable kept her face blank. She'd learned young that showing weakness in this pack was asking to be eaten alive. "No," she said. The word tasted like ash. "I don't contest it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some looked relieved, others disappointed. They'd wanted the drama of a challenge, blood on the ground, something to gossip about for weeks. Rowan finally looked at her then, and something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe. Or pity. Sable didn't know which was worse. "Then it's settled," Dane said. "Rowan Cade is released from his bond to Sable Arden. The union is dissolved." Just like that. 3 years erased with a single sentence. The crowd began to disperse, conversations starting up in low voices. Sable stood frozen, watching Rowan take Lissa's hand and lead her away. The blonde woman glanced back once, her pale eyes meeting Sable's for just a moment. There was something cold in that gaze, something that made Sable's skin crawl. "Tough break, Arden." Sable turned to find Marcus Vale standing beside her, arms crossed and a smirk on his weathered face. Marcus was one of the pack's senior hunters, a man who'd never liked her much. Or maybe he just enjoyed other people's misery. "Could be worse," Marcus continued, his tone conversational. "At least he didn't challenge you for shared resources. Though I suppose you don't have much to fight over, do you?" Sable's jaw tightened. "I'll manage." "Will you?" Marcus tilted his head, studying her like she was a wounded deer. "No mate. No protector. Winter's coming, and you know how territorial the pack gets when resources run thin. People without bonds tend to slip through the cracks." It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. Just a statement of fact, delivered with the casual cruelty that pack hierarchy allowed. Sable had been part of a bonded pair. Now she was nothing. Fair game. "I said I'll manage," Sable repeated, her voice flat. Marcus shrugged and walked away, leaving her alone in the rapidly emptying clearing. Sable pressed a hand to her stomach, hidden under the loose fabric of her shirt. 12 weeks. She'd found out 3 days before Lissa arrived, before Rowan's entire world had apparently rewritten itself overnight. She'd been planning how to tell him, imagining his reaction. Shock, maybe, but then joy. They'd talked about a family someday, when things were more stable. Now someday had evaporated like morning fog. She couldn't tell anyone. Not now. A pregnancy without a mate meant vulnerability, meant questions about provision and protection that she had no good answers for. The pack might tolerate her as a lone wolf for a while, but a lone wolf with a child? That was instability. That was risk. And Dane Thornridge didn't tolerate risk. Sable turned and headed toward the tree line, away from the settlement's main cluster of cabins and communal buildings. Her own cabin sat on the eastern edge of pack territory, a small structure she'd helped build with Rowan 2 years ago. It had felt like a beginning then. Now it just felt isolated. The path wound through Douglas firs and western hemlock, the ground carpeted with needles that muffled her footsteps. Afternoon light filtered through the canopy in dusty shafts. Normally, this walk calmed her. Today everything felt wrong. The trees too close, the shadows too deep, the silence too heavy. She was halfway home when she heard footsteps behind her. Sable spun, her wolf surging forward instinctively, but it was just Clara Moss jogging to catch up. Clara was petite and freckled, with auburn hair pulled back in a messy braid. She'd been Sable's closest friend since childhood, one of the few people in the pack who didn't treat relationships like chess matches. "Hey," Clara said, slightly out of breath. "Wait up." Sable's shoulders relaxed marginally. "You don't need to check on me." "Too bad. I'm doing it anyway." Clara fell into step beside her. They walked in silence for a moment before Clara spoke again. That was brutal. I'm sorry." "It is what it is." "It's bullshit is what it is." Clara's voice sharpened with anger. "True mate bond? Please. I've known Rowan my whole life. That guy couldn't find his true anything if it bit him on the ass." Despite everything, Sable felt a ghost of a smile tug at her mouth. "Don't hold back, Clara. Tell me how you really feel." "I'm serious." Clara stopped walking, forcing Sable to turn and face her. "Something's off about this. Lissa shows up out of nowhere, and suddenly Rowan's acting like you never existed. That's not how bonds work. Real bonds build over time. They don't just erase people." Sable wanted to believe her, but doubt was a poison, and it had already seeped into her bones. Maybe I was never his real bond to begin with. Maybe we were just comfortable. "Stop!" Clara grabbed her arm, eyes fierce. "I saw you two together. That wasn't comfortable. That was real. And now it's gone, and nobody's asking the right questions." "What questions?" "Like where Lissa actually came from. Like why she's wearing charms I've never seen before. Did you notice the necklace? It's not pack made. And like why Rowan smells different." Sable frowned. "Different how?" "I don't know. Wrong. Like something's layered over his scent. I noticed it yesterday when he walked past me near the kitchens." Clara lowered her voice. "Sable, I think something's messing with him. Maybe with both of them." "Magic?" Sable's skepticism must have shown on her face because Clara's expression hardened. "You think magic doesn't exist just because Dane banned it? Come on. Half the old families still keep charms and wards, and there are things out in the deep woods that don't care about pack law." Sable resumed walking, her mind churning. Magic was a dangerous topic in Thornridge. Dane's predecessor had been killed by a rival pack's shaman 20 years ago, and ever since Dane had enforced a strict ban on any kind of supernatural practice beyond basic shifting. Anyone caught with spelled objects faced exile. But Clara wasn't prone to conspiracy theories. If she thought something was wrong, "Even if you're right," Sable said slowly, "what am I supposed to do about it? Go to Dane and accuse his best hunter's new mate of witchcraft? Based on a weird feeling? No. But you could watch, pay attention, and maybe—" Clara hesitated. "Maybe you could make sure you're protected, just in case." They reached Sable's cabin, a sturdy structure of weathered wood with a stone chimney and a small porch that overlooked a clearing. It looked empty, lonely. Before, it had been filled with Rowan's presence, his tools by the door, his scent in every room, his laughter echoing off the walls. Now, it was just hers. "You want to come in?" Sable offered, not because she wanted company, but because Clara looked worried. Clara shook her head. "I have kitchen duty in 20 minutes, but I'll come by tomorrow, okay? We'll figure this out." Sable nodded, and Clara headed back down the path, disappearing into the trees. Alone again, Sable climbed the porch steps and pushed open the door. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it that morning. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A hallway led to the bedroom and a small washroom. It smelled like cedar and cold ash. Sable lit the fire, then sank onto the worn couch Rowan had salvaged from an abandoned homestead last spring. She stared into the flames, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach again. A baby. She was going to have a baby. In a pack where unmated mothers were rare and often viewed with suspicion, where resources were carefully allocated based on bonds and usefulness, where winter culled the weak, she needed a plan. The thought crystallized slowly, cutting through the fog of shock and grief. Wallowing wouldn't save her. Hoping Rowan would suddenly come to his senses wouldn't save her. She needed action. She needed protection. She needed an alliance. The idea was insane, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it lodged in her brain and wouldn't let go. Dane Thornridge had never taken a mate. Everyone knew it. He'd been alpha for 15 years, ruthless and solitary, respected but not loved. Rumor said he'd lost someone young before he took power and had never recovered. He kept the pack strong through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance, but he was alone in a position that traditionally demanded a partner. What if she offered herself as that partner? Sable's wolf recoiled at the thought. Dane was dangerous, cold. He'd executed 3 challengers in the past decade and exiled countless others for infractions most packs would forgive. Bonding with him wouldn't be a relationship. It would be a transaction, a strategic alliance with no warmth, no affection, no real partnership. But it would be protection, status, a place in the pack hierarchy that couldn't be easily challenged. And if she was careful, if she negotiated the terms right, it might be enough to keep her and her child safe. The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through the trees, a sound like distant voices. Sable stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, Rowan was probably with Lysa, wrapped up in whatever spell or delusion had stolen him away. Somewhere out there, the pack was settling in for the night, secure in their bonds and hierarchies. And here she was, alone with a secret that could destroy her, and an idea that might save her life, or end it. She'd give herself tonight to grieve. Tomorrow, she'd act. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Sable woke before sunrise, muscles stiff from sleeping fitfully on the couch. She dreamed of drowning, of dark water closing over her head while Rowan's voice called from somewhere she couldn't reach. Her mother's voice had been there too, distant and sad. Sable shook off the images and dressed carefully. She braided her dark hair back, chose sturdy clothes that didn't look desperate or try hard, dark jeans, a flannel shirt, her good boots. She needed to look competent, stable, like someone making a rational decision, not a panicked gamble. The walk to Dane's house took 15 minutes through waking forest. Other pack members were starting to move around. She saw smoke rising from chimneys, heard the distant sound of the lumber mill starting up for the day. A few people noticed her and nodded, their expressions carefully neutral. Dane's house sat at the heart of the settlement, a large 2-story structure that served as both his residence and the pack's administrative center. The ground floor held meeting rooms and offices. The second floor was his private space, off limits to everyone except by invitation. Sable had been inside exactly twice in her life, once for a pack council meeting when she turned 18, and once to report a boundary incursion she'd spotted while hunting. Both times, Dane had been all business, his attention focused and intense in a way that made her feel like a specimen under glass. She climbed the front steps and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. The door opened. But it wasn't Dane. It was Cale Thorne, Dane's younger brother and the pack's lead scout. Cale was leaner than Dane, with the same dark hair but sharper features and eyes the color of winter ice. He looked surprised to see her. "Sable," he said, his tone neutral. "Dane's not here. He left for the northern boundary at dawn. Won't be back until afternoon." "Oh." Sable's carefully prepared speech died in her throat. She hadn't expected this. I needed to speak with him. It's important." Cale studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. There was something about him that had always made Sable uneasy, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that felt too observant, like he saw more than he should. "You want to wait inside?" he offered, stepping back. "I was just making coffee." Sable hesitated, then nodded and followed him in. The house's interior was austere. Functional furniture, maps on the walls, shelves filled with records and reports. It smelled like leather and wood smoke. Kyle led her to the kitchen, a surprisingly warm space with morning light streaming through east-facing windows. He poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across the counter to her. "Heard about yesterday," he said quietly. "That was rough." "Everyone heard." Sable wrapped her hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. Pack's too small for secrets. True. Kale leaned against the counter, watching her with those unsettling eyes. So what do you need with Dane, if you don't mind me asking? She minded, but Kale was Dane's closest advisor, and if she was serious about this plan, she'd need to get past him first. I want to propose an alliance, Sable said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. A formal bond between myself and your brother. Kale went very still. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then slowly, he set down his coffee cup. You want to mate with the alpha. I want a strategic partnership, Sable corrected. I'm not interested in romance, but I need protection, and Dane needs a bonded partner to solidify his position. It's practical. Practical, Kyle repeated, his tone flat. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. Sable, do you have any idea how many people have tried to bond with Dane over the years? He's turned down everyone. High-ranking families, alphas from other packs, people with resources and connections you don't have. What makes you think he'd say yes to you? The question stung, but it was fair. Sable took a breath. Because I'm not asking for love, I'm not asking for power. I'm asking for a transaction that benefits us both. Dane's been alpha for 15 years without a mate. That makes people nervous. They wonder about succession, about stability. A bond would answer those questions. And she paused. I need a place in this pack that can't be challenged. Not anymore. Kyle was quiet for a long time, studying her face like he was reading a language only he understood. Finally, he spoke. There's more to this than you're saying. It wasn't a question. Sable's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. Everyone has their reasons, she said carefully. Yeah. Kale pushed off the counter and walked to the window, staring out at the settlement. Here's the thing, Sable. Dane's going to ask you why. And if you lie to him, he'll know. He always knows. So whatever secret you're carrying, and I can smell it on you, the fear and the desperation, you better be ready to put it on the table. Sable's breath caught. I'm not. You are. Kyle cut her off, his voice gentle but firm. He turned to face her. And for what it's worth, I don't think it's a bad idea. Surprising as hell, but not bad. Dane needs someone who sees him as a means to an end, not some prize to win. And you need someone who won't ask questions about what you're running from. He picked up his coffee again, his expression thoughtful. But there's something you should know. About Dane. About why he's never bonded. Sable waited, her pulse loud in her ears. 15 years ago, before he became alpha, Dane had a mate. Not official, but real. Her name was Vera Cross. She was everything to him. Smart, strong, stubborn as hell. They were going to bond officially as soon as he challenged for alpha. Kale's voice went quiet. She died the night before the challenge. Drowned in a storm off the cliffs. Dane found her body the next morning. He still challenged that night. Still won. But something in him broke that day, and it never healed. Sable's throat tightened. She'd heard rumors, whispers about a lost love, but never the full story. He doesn't talk about her, Kyle continued. Doesn't acknowledge that she ever existed. But he goes to the cliffs every year on the anniversary of her death. Stands there for hours in the wind and rain, like he's waiting for something that's never going to come back. Why are you telling me this? Sable asked softly. Because if you're serious about this alliance, you need to understand what you're walking into. Dane isn't cold because he wants to be. He's cold because it's the only way he survived losing everything that mattered. And if you ask him to bond with you, you're asking him to open a door he's kept locked for 15 years. Kyle met her eyes. That's not nothing, even for a practical arrangement. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of a clock on the wall. Sable thought about Rowan, about the way he'd looked through her yesterday like she was already gone. She thought about the life growing inside her, fragile and depending on choices she made right now. I understand, she said finally, and I still want to ask him. Kyle nodded slowly. Then you'll get your chance. He should be back around 2. I'll make sure you get time with him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet? Kale's smile was wry. If Dane says yes, your life is about to get a whole lot more complicated. Sable finished her coffee and left, stepping back out into the cold morning. The settlement was fully awake now, people moving between buildings, children laughing somewhere distant, the rhythmic sound of axes on wood echoing from the lumberyard. She walked without destination, her mind spinning. Kael's story about Vera Cross had shaken something loose in her chest. She'd thought of Dane as a machine, all ruthless calculation and cold strategy. But machines didn't grieve. Machines didn't stand on storm-battered cliffs waiting for ghosts. Maybe that made this easier, or maybe it made it impossible. 2 o'clock came with agonizing slowness. Sable spent the intervening hours in her cabin, pacing and rehearsing arguments that sounded weaker with every repetition. By the time she walked back to Dane's house, her palms were sweating and her wolf was a tight coil of anxiety beneath her skin. Kael answered the door again, but this time he just nodded and stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway. He's in his office. Second door on the right. Sable walked down the hall, her footsteps muffled by a threadbare runner. She stopped outside the office door, took a breath, and knocked. "Come in." She pushed open the door. The office was lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets, maps covering one wall showing packed territory and the surrounding wilderness. Dane sat behind a heavy wooden desk, reading through papers with a focused intensity that didn't shift when she entered. "Sable Arden," he said without looking up. "Kael said you wanted to speak with me." "Yes, Alpha." "Sit." She sat in the chair across from his desk, forcing herself not to fidget. Up close, Dane was even more imposing than she remembered, broad-shouldered and scarred with gray threading through dark hair at his temples. His eyes, when he finally looked up, were the same cold blue as his brother's, but without Kael's warmth. "What can I do for you?" Dane asked, his tone polite but distant. Sable's prepared speech dissolved. Instead, she said simply, "I want to propose a bonded alliance between you and me." Dane's expression didn't change. He set down the papers he'd been reading and leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same intensity he'd probably used to evaluate a hunting strategy. "Why?" he asked. "Because it benefits both of us. You need a bonded mate to stabilize your position long term. I need protection that can't be challenged." "Protection from what?" "From being vulnerable, unmated, easy to dismiss or push aside." Dane was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You're talking about Rowan." "I'm talking about the reality of pack structure." "Same thing." Dane tilted his head slightly. "Rowan Cade publicly dissolved your bond yesterday. You're here less than 24 hours later proposing to bond with me instead. That's not strategy, Sable, that's panic." The words hit like a slap, mostly because they were true. Sable fought the urge to look away. "Maybe it started as panic," she admitted. "But it's still a good idea. You've been alpha for 15 years without a mate. People talk. They wonder about succession, about whether you're building something sustainable or just holding power until someone stronger comes along. A bonded partner answers those questions. And what do you bring to this partnership besides vulnerability and desperation?" The bluntness should have hurt. Instead, it clarified things. Dane wasn't interested in flattery or emotion. He wanted facts. "Loyalty," Sable said. "I'm not interested in challenging you or undermining your authority. I don't want power for its own sake. I just want stability, and I'll do whatever it takes to maintain that stability, including supporting every decision you make publicly, even if I disagree privately. That's called being a doormat, not a partner. No, it's called understanding hierarchy and working within it." Dane's eyes narrowed slightly. "What else?" "I'm a good hunter. I know the territory as well as anyone except Kael. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I don't need emotional validation to function." She paused. "And I won't ask you for things you can't give." "Like what?" "Like love, or romance, or whatever fantasy people expect from a mated bond." Sable held his gaze. "This would be a practical arrangement. We both know it. We'd both benefit from it, and neither of us would have to pretend it's something it's not." Silence filled the room. Dane's expression remained unreadable, but something shifted in his posture. A slight easing of tension, maybe, or a recalculation. "You're leaving something out," he said finally. Sable's heart stumbled. "What do you mean?" "There's a reason you need protection this urgently. Something beyond wounded pride or fear of being socially ostracized." Dane leaned forward, his gaze pinning her in place. "What is it?" She could lie. Should lie. But Kael's warning echoed in her head. If you lie to him, he'll know. "I'm pregnant," Sable said, the words falling into the space between them like stones into deep water. 12 weeks. Rowan doesn't know. Nobody knows except you and now Kyle, because he's too observant for his own good. Dane went very still. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint rustle of wind against the windows. Then, quietly, Dane asked, "Does Rowan know?" "No. I found out 3 days before, Lissa." Sable's hands clenched in her lap. "I was going to tell him, and then everything changed. And you want me to bond with you knowing you're carrying another man's child?" "Yes. That's asking a lot." "I know." Sable forced herself to meet his eyes. "But in 6 months, it won't matter whose genetics the child carries. What will matter is who claims it, who protects it, who gives it a place in the pack." She took a breath. "I'm offering you that choice. Bond with me, and the child becomes yours in every way that matters. No questions, no complications." Dane stood and walked to the window, his back to her. Sable watched the set of his shoulders, trying to read body language that gave nothing away. "You know what the pack will say," Dane said without turning around. "They'll say you manipulated me, that you trapped me with a pregnancy that isn't mine, that you're using me to secure resources for Rowan's child. Let them say it. As long as we're bonded, their opinions don't matter. Opinions always matter, especially in a pack this size." Dane turned to face her, his expression still unreadable. "But you're right about one thing. I do need a bonded mate, and I'm not going to find someone who wants less from me than you do." Hope flared in Sable's chest, dangerous and sharp. "I have conditions," Dane continued. "This stays strictly practical. No expectations of affection or intimacy beyond what's necessary to maintain the appearance of a functioning bond. You support my decisions publicly, but you're free to disagree privately. And the child, your child, will be raised as pack, with all the rights and protections that entails." "I agree to all of that." "I'm not finished." Dane's voice hardened slightly. "If you betray me, if you undermine my authority, if you conspire with Rowan, if you put the pack at risk in any way, the bond ends immediately, and you'll be exiled. No second chances." The threat was real. Sable saw it in the cold certainty of his gaze, but she'd expected nothing less. "Understood," she said. Dane studied her for another long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. "We'll announce the bond at tomorrow's gathering. Kyle will handle the formal paperwork. You'll move into this house by the end of the week." He paused. "Welcome to the deep end, Sable Arden. Try not to drown." He turned back to his papers, a clear dismissal. Sable stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the door. She was halfway through when Dane spoke again. "Sable." She stopped, looking back. "I'm not a good man," Dane said quietly, his eyes still on his papers. "I'm not kind, and I'm not patient, and I don't know how to be anything except what I am. If you're expecting me to change, you're going to be disappointed." "I'm not expecting you to change," Sable said. "I'm expecting you to be exactly who you are." Something flickered across Dane's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then it was gone. "Good," he said. "Then we understand each other." Sable left the office, closing the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat slowly return to normal. She'd done it. Made a deal with the most dangerous man in the pack, bought herself and her child a chance at survival, and now she had to hope it wouldn't cost her everything else. News traveled fast in Thornridge. By sunset, the entire pack knew. Sable heard the whispers as she walked back to her cabin, voices cutting off mid-sentence when she passed, eyes tracking her movement with naked curiosity and thinly veiled judgment. She kept her head up, her stride even, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Clara intercepted her halfway down the eastern path, slightly out of breath and looking equal parts shocked and impressed. "Please tell me the rumor isn't true," Clara said, falling into step beside her. "Please tell me you didn't actually propose to Dane Thornridge." "I proposed an alliance. He accepted." "Holy hell!" Clara grabbed her arm, forcing her to stop. "Sable, do you have any idea what you just did? Dane doesn't do relationships. He barely does conversations. And you just walked into his office and what? Made a business pitch?" "Something like that." Clara stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're insane. You know that, right? Completely, certifiably insane." "Probably." Sable resumed walking. "But it's done. The announcement goes out tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Clara jogged to catch up. As in less than 24 hours from now? Sable, people are going to lose their minds. Rowan's going to lose his mind. You were with him for 3 years, and now suddenly you're bonding with the alpha? Nobody's going to believe this is real. I don't care what they believe. Well, you should, because half the pack is going to think you manipulated Dane, and the other half is going to think he's using you for something. Claire's voice dropped. And Rowan, Sable, he's not going to just let this go. Whatever's wrong with him, whatever Lissa did to him, he's still going to have an opinion about you bonding with someone else. Sable's jaw tightened. Rowan gave up any right to an opinion when he chose her. They reached the cabin and Sable pushed open the door. Inside, everything looked exactly as she'd left it. Cold fireplace, empty rooms, the ghost of a life that had evaporated overnight. Clara followed her in, closing the door against the evening chill. "You're really doing this," Clara said quietly. "I'm really doing this." "Why?" Clara's tone wasn't accusatory, just confused. "I know you need protection, but there are other ways. You could petition for independent status. You could bond with someone less terrifying." "Why Dane?" "Because I'm pregnant, and I need someone powerful enough that nobody will dare question it. Because I'm desperate, and Dane's the only person who doesn't need me to be anything except useful." But Sable couldn't say any of that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Because it's practical," she said instead. "And because he's the only person who won't pretend it's something it's not." Clara studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. "Okay, I don't understand it, and I think you're walking into a nightmare, but okay. If this is what you want, I've got your back." Relief flooded through Sable, sharp and unexpected. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you survive the announcement tomorrow." Clara headed for the door, then paused. "And Sable, be careful. I know Dane's the alpha, but that doesn't mean he's safe. Especially not for someone he doesn't actually care about." She left before Sable could respond. The cabin fell silent except for the wind moving through the eaves. Sable lit the fire and sat on the floor in front of it, watching flames catch and spread. Her hand drifted to her stomach again, a gesture that was becoming habit. 12 weeks. In 6 months, give or take, there would be a child, a life that depended entirely on choices she made right now. She hoped to hell she was making the right ones. Pop. The gathering the next evening drew the entire pack. The clearing at the settlement's center filled with bodies, some seated on benches, others standing in loose clusters, all of them buzzing with speculation. Sable stood near the front, trying to ignore the weight of stares burning into her back. Dane arrived precisely on time, Kyle at his side. They moved through the crowd like wolves through tall grass, efficient, purposeful, radiating an authority that made people step back without thinking. Dane's expression was unreadable as always, giving nothing away. He climbed onto the raised platform at the clearing center, and the crowd fell silent. "Most of you have already heard," Dane said, his voice carrying easily across the space. "But I'm making it official. Sable Arden and I are forming a bonded alliance, effective immediately. The union will be formalized by pack law within the week." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd, even though they'd all known it was coming. Hearing it stated so bluntly, so matter-of-factly, made it real in a way rumors couldn't. Someone in the back called out, "What about Rowan?" Dane's gaze found the speaker. Marcus Vale, of course. The man had a talent for stirring up trouble. "Rowan dissolved his bond with Sable 2 days ago," Dane said flatly. "He has no claim and no say in this decision. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Marcus subsided, but the murmurs didn't stop. Sable caught fragments of conversation. Too fast, suspicious, what's she getting out of this? But forced herself to keep her expression neutral. Then she saw Rowan. He stood near the edge of the crowd, Lissa beside him, and the look on his face was pure shock. Not anger, not betrayal, just complete uncomprehending disbelief, like he couldn't process what he was hearing. Lissa, on the other hand, looked furious. Her pale eyes locked onto Sable with an intensity that made her skin crawl. There was something wrong in that gaze, something cold and calculating and deeply, fundamentally off. Dane continued speaking, outlining the logistics of the bond in clinical terms. Sable would move into his house. She'd retain her hunting rights and personal property. The union was strategic, designed to strengthen pack stability. He didn't mention love. Didn't mention partnership in any real sense, just laid out the facts like he was describing a trade agreement. When he finished, he looked directly at Sable. Do you accept these terms? Every eye in the clearing turned to her. The pressure was enormous, centuries of pack tradition and social expectation pressing down like a physical weight. Sable thought of her mother, who died alone in a storm because she hadn't had anyone to protect her. Thought of the child growing inside her, fragile and depending on decisions made in this exact moment. I accept, she said clearly. Dane nodded once. Then it's done. The bond is recognized. He stepped down from the platform, and just like that, the gathering was over. People began to disperse, conversations starting up immediately, louder now, less cautious. Sable stood frozen, unsure what to do next. Kyle appeared at her elbow. You okay? I don't know yet. Fair. He glanced around at the dispersing crowd. For what it's worth, I think you handled that well. Most people would have cracked under that kind of scrutiny. I'm very good at not cracking. Yeah, I've noticed. Kale's expression turned thoughtful. Dane wants you to move in by tomorrow night. I'll help you pack if you want. Make the transition easier. I don't have that much to pack. Even better. Rowan appeared before Sable could respond, pushing through the thinning crowd with Lissa trailing behind him. His face was flushed, his movements jerky with agitation. Sable, he said, slightly out of breath. We need to talk. Now. Kyle stepped between them smoothly, his posture casual, but unmistakably protective. I don't think that's a good idea. I wasn't asking you, Rowan snapped. His eyes stayed locked on Sable. Please, just 5 minutes. Sable should have said no. Should have let Kyle handle it, let Dane's authority create a wall between her and this conversation. But part of her, the part that had loved Rowan for 3 years, that had planned a future with him, needed to hear what he had to say. It's fine, she told Kyle. I can handle this. Kyle didn't look convinced, but he stepped back. I'll be right over there, he said pointedly, moving just far enough away to give them privacy, but close enough to intervene if needed. Rowan waited until Kyle was out of earshot, then turned to Sable with desperation written all over his face. What the hell are you doing? He demanded. Bonding with Dane? Are you serious right now? Completely serious. Why? To get back at me? To prove some kind of point? Sable's temper flared. Not everything is about you, Rowan. I'm doing what I need to do to survive. By throwing yourself at the alpha? Rowan's voice rose. You don't even like Dane. Nobody likes Dane. He's cold and ruthless and he offered me protection when you took yours away. Sable cut him off. You don't get to dissolve our bond and then question my choices. You gave up that right. I didn't have a choice. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. The mate bond. It's real, Sable. What I have with Lissa, it's not something I chose. It just happened. Funny how these things just happen right when they're most convenient. Lissa drifted closer, her expression unreadable. Up close, Sable noticed details she'd missed before. The strange necklace Clara had mentioned, made of dark metal and stone that seemed to absorb light. The way Lissa's scent didn't quite match the forest and earth smell that characterized pack members. The wrongness Clara had sensed. Rowan, Lissa said softly, placing a hand on his arm. We should go. She's made her choice. Something in her tone made Sable's wolf bristle. It was too smooth, too controlled, like someone reading lines from a script. No, Rowan said, shaking off Lissa's hand. His eyes stayed locked on Sable. I need to understand. You really think Dane can give you what you need? He's incapable of caring about anyone. Everyone knows that. I don't need him to care about me, Sable said quietly. I just need him to keep his word. That's not a life, that's a prison sentence. Then it's my prison sentence to serve. Rowan stared at her, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Confusion, maybe, or the ghost of recognition, like he was seeing her for the first time in days. But then Lissa's hand found his arm again, and whatever clarity had been there vanished. Come on, Lissa murmured. Let her go. This time Rowan allowed himself to be led away. Sable watched them disappear into the twilight, feeling something in her chest crack and resettle into a new, unfamiliar shape. Kyle reappeared at her side. You good? Define good. Fair point. He gestured toward the path leading to Dane's house. Come on, Let's get you settled before this day gets any worse. Moving into Dane's house took less than 2 hours. Sable didn't own much. Clothes, a few personal items, some books her mother had left her. Everything fit into 3 bags that Kael helped her carry across the settlement. The second floor of Dane's house was larger than she'd expected. Her room, she refused to think of it as their room, even though technically it was, occupied the eastern corner, with windows overlooking the forest and a small attached washroom. The furniture was simple but well made: a bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a chair by the window. Dane appeared in the doorway as she was unpacking the last bag. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. "If you need anything else, let Kael know," he said. "Furniture, supplies, whatever." "This is fine." An awkward silence stretched between them. Sable folded a shirt with unnecessary precision, hyper-aware of Dane's presence filling the doorway. "I'm usually up by 5, Dane said finally. "I'll try to be quiet, but the house has old floors. They creak." "I'm a light sleeper anyway." "Good to know." Another pause. "Kitchen's on the ground floor. Help yourself to whatever's there. I don't cook much. Kael usually handles meals. But there's coffee and basics." Sable nodded, still not looking at him. This was excruciating. They were dancing around each other like strangers, which technically they were, except now they were bonded strangers living in the same house. Sable. She finally turned to face him. Dane was watching her with that unreadable expression she was starting to recognize as his default. "This doesn't have to be weird," he said. "It's already weird." "Okay, fair, but it doesn't have to be unbearable." He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "We're both adults. We both know what this is. Let's just coexist. You do your thing, I'll do mine, and we'll figure out the rest as we go." It was probably the most reasonable thing anyone could say in this situation, and it made Sable feel slightly less like she was drowning. "Okay," she said. Dane nodded and left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Sable finished unpacking in silence, then sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window at the darkening forest. Somewhere out there, Rowan was probably with Lysa, wrapped up in whatever spell had stolen him away. Somewhere out there, the pack was gossiping about her shocking decision. And here she was, in the Alpha's house, bound to a man who'd lost someone 15 years ago and never recovered. She pressed a hand to her stomach. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise. We're going to be okay." The baby, of course, didn't answer, but saying the words out loud made them feel more real. Us. The next 3 days passed in a surreal blur. Sable threw herself into work, hunting, boundary patrols, anything that kept her moving and too busy to think. The pack watched her with undisguised curiosity, but nobody confronted her directly. Dane's authority created a buffer that most people weren't willing to cross, except apparently for the pack elders. Sable was returning from a morning hunt when Kael intercepted her near the main lodge, his expression grim. "Heads up," he said. "The council wants to meet with you this afternoon. Officially." Sable's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because they're suspicious as hell about this bond, and they want answers." Kyle ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. Dane tried to shut it down, but Marcus Vale pushed hard enough that the others agreed. "You're going to have to face them." "What do they want to know?" "Everything. Why you proposed, what you're getting out of it, whether you're pregnant." The last word hit like a punch. Sable's vision tunneled briefly. "How do they—" "They don't know for sure," Kael said quickly. "But it's the obvious question. Unmated woman suddenly bonds with the Alpha days after her partner leaves her. People are going to wonder if there's a baby involved." "What did Dane tell them?" "Nothing. He said your reproductive status is none of their business." Kael's expression softened slightly. "But Sable, they're not going to let this go. The council has the right to question bonds that might affect pack stability. And whether we like it or not, this bond is raising questions." Sable forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. "When's the meeting?" 2 hours. Main hall." Kael hesitated. "Dane will be there, but he can't answer for you. You're going to have to speak for yourself." "I know." Kael squeezed her shoulder briefly, then headed back toward the main settlement. Sable stood alone in the path, trying to prepare herself for an interrogation she desperately hoped to avoid. 2 hours later, she walked into the main hall with her spine straight and her expression carefully neutral. The council sat at a long table, 5 elders representing different pack factions. Marcus Vale occupied the center seat, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Dane stood off to the side, arms crossed, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Sable Arden," Marcus said, his tone formal, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "I wasn't aware I had a choice." "You always have a choice. We just prefer cooperation." Marcus gestured to an empty chair facing the table. "Please, sit." Sable sat, her hands folded in her lap. Around the table, the other elders watched her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. She recognized all of them: Vera Stone, the pack's head healer; Jonathan Cross, who managed resource distribution; Lydia Marsh, who handled disputes; and Thomas Wick, the eldest council member at nearly 70. "We'll get straight to the point," Marcus said. "Your bond with Alpha Thornridge has raised concerns. The council needs to understand the circumstances." "What circumstances would those be?" "The timing, for one. You dissolved your bond with Rowan Cade and immediately proposed to the Alpha. That suggests either opportunism or desperation." "Or practicality," Sable countered. "I needed protection. Dane needed a bonded mate. It made sense." "Did it?" Marcus leaned forward. "Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you're using the Alpha to secure status you wouldn't otherwise have access to." "That's exactly what I'm doing. It's called a strategic alliance. Dane and I both agreed to it." Vera Stone spoke up, her voice gentler than Marcus's. "Sable, nobody's questioning your right to bond with whomever you choose, but we need to ensure this bond serves the pack's interests, not just personal ones." "How does it not serve the pack's interests?" Sable asked. "You've all been complaining for years that Dane needs a mate. Now he has one." "A mate he barely knows," Jonathan Cross interjected. "A mate who was, until 3 days ago, bonded to someone else. Forgive us for being skeptical." Thomas Wick, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. "There's another question that needs asking." Everyone turned to look at him. The old man's eyes were sharp despite his age, missing nothing. "Are you pregnant?" he asked bluntly. The room went dead silent. Sable felt Dane's gaze on her but didn't look at him. This was her decision to make, her truth to tell or conceal. She could lie. Say no, redirect the conversation, buy herself time. But lies had a way of unraveling, and when they did, the consequence would be worse than anything she faced right now. "Yes," Sable said clearly. "I'm pregnant, 12 weeks." The reaction was immediate. Vera's eyebrows shot up. Jonathan sat back in his chair, muttering something under his breath. Lydia's expression shuttered closed. Only Marcus looked triumphant, like she'd just confirmed his worst suspicions. "And the father?" Marcus pressed. "Is irrelevant," Dane cut in, his voice like ice. "The child will be mine by bond law. That's all the council needs to know. Respectfully, Alpha, the council disagrees." Marcus turned back to Sable. "If you're carrying Rowan Cade's child, that creates complications. Shared parentage, potential custody disputes, questions about who's responsible for provision." "Rowan doesn't know," Sable said, "and he won't. As far as anyone's concerned, this child is Dane's." "You can't just declare that and make it true." "Actually, I can. Bond law is clear. A child born during a bonded union belongs to that union, regardless of genetics." Sable met Marcus's gaze steadily. "Unless you're planning to challenge bond law itself?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew she was right. Pack law protected children born during bonds, no exceptions. It was one of the few absolute rules Dane's predecessor had established, designed to prevent exactly this kind of dispute. "This is irregular," Lydia said carefully. "Not illegal, but irregular. The pack has a right to be concerned." "The pack has a right to mind its own business," Dane said flatly. "Sable and I have a legal bond. She's pregnant. The child will be raised as mine. Everything else is speculation and gossip." Vera Stone leaned forward, her healer's instinct overriding political concerns. "Sable, have you been to see me? 12 weeks is early, but you should be getting regular checkups." "Not yet. I was planning to come by this week." "Do it tomorrow," Vera said firmly. "First thing. I don't care what the council thinks about this bond. A pregnant woman needs medical attention." Something in Sable's chest loosened slightly at the genuine concern in Vera's voice. At least one person here saw her as something other than a political problem. Thomas Wick spoke again, his old eyes studying Sable intently. You know what you're getting into, girl? Bonding with an alpha is hard enough. Doing it under these circumstances, with a child on the way and half the pack questioning your motives, that's going to test you in ways you can't imagine. I know. Do you? Thomas's expression was unreadable. Dane Thornridge is a good alpha. Strong, fair, strategic. But he's also haunted by things he won't talk about. You're walking into that haunting. Make sure you're ready for what you find. The weight of his words settled over the room. Sable thought about what Kyle had told her, about Vera Cross, about the drowned girl and the broken man who'd never recovered, about standing on storm-battered cliffs waiting for ghosts. I'm ready, she said, hoping it was true. The council exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus sighed. Fine. The bond stands. But we'll be watching, Sable Arden, and if this arrangement causes problems for the pack, we won't hesitate to revisit this conversation. Noted, Sable said coolly. Dane pushed off the wall. Are we done here? For now, Marcus said. Dane gestured for Sable to follow him, and they left the hall together. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and cold, turning the settlement's mud paths into reflective puddles. That went about as well as expected, Dane said once they were out of earshot. They think I'm using you. They think a lot of things. Most of them are none of their business. Dane glanced at her. You should go see Vera tomorrow, like she said. Get checked out properly. I will. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Dane said, You didn't have to tell them about the pregnancy. You could have denied it. And then what? Hide it for 6 months? Hope nobody noticed? Fair point. Sable stopped walking, forcing Dane to turn and face her. Are you having second thoughts? About the bond? No. The answer came without hesitation. Are you? No. Then we're good. Dane's expression was unreadable as always, but something in his posture had relaxed slightly. For what it's worth, you handled that better than most people would have. The council respects strength. You showed them you're not going to be pushed around. It was probably the closest thing to a compliment Dane was capable of giving. Sable felt a small, unexpected warmth in her chest. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. He was right. The pack was watching, waiting for her to fail. Rowan was still under whatever spell Lissa had woven. And somewhere in the shadows, forces Sable didn't understand were moving pieces on a board she couldn't see. But for now, she had protection. She had a place. She had a chance. And sometimes that was enough. 3 nights later, Sable woke to the sound of screaming. She bolted upright, her wolf surging forward instinctively. The screaming came from outside, raw, terrified, echoing through the settlement. Dane was already moving, pulling on clothes with practiced efficiency. Stay here, he ordered, heading for the door. Like hell, Sable shot back, grabbing her own clothes. Dane gave her a sharp look but didn't argue. They ran down the stairs together, bursting out into chaos. The settlement square was full of people, pack members stumbling out of houses, calling questions, looking for the source of the screaming. Kale was already there, trying to organize a response. What happened? Dane demanded. It's Lissa, Kale said grimly. Rowan found her in the woods. You need to see this. They followed Kyle to the eastern tree line. A crowd had gathered, held back by a few of the senior hunters. In the center, Rowan knelt beside a prone figure, Lissa, her body convulsing, eyes rolled back in her head, mouth open in a soundless scream. The necklace she'd been wearing lay broken on the ground beside her, the dark stones shattered. Vera Stone pushed through the crowd, her healer's bag in hand. She dropped to her knees beside Lysa, checking vitals, muttering under her breath. What the hell is wrong with her? Rowan demanded, his voice breaking. She was fine, and then she just collapsed and started screaming. Everyone back, Vera ordered. Give me room. The crowd shuffled backward. Sable found herself standing next to Clara, who looked pale and shaken. I told you something was wrong with her, Clara whispered. I told you. Lissa's convulsions stopped abruptly. Her eyes snapped open, focused and aware, and she sat up so fast Vera jerked backward. No, Lissa gasped, her hands going to her throat, searching for the missing necklace. No, no, no. Then she looked directly at Sable, and for just a moment her expression twisted into something that wasn't human at all. "You," Lysa hissed. "This is your fault." And then she collapsed again, this time going completely still. Vera checked her pulse, her expression grim. "She's alive. Barely. We need to get her to the medical cabin. Now." 4-pack members moved forward to carry Lysa. Rowan followed, his face white with shock and terror. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with speculation and fear. Dane caught Sable's arm. "Inside. Now." They went back to the house, Kael trailing behind them. In Dane's office, with the door closed, the Alpha turned to face her. "Tell me everything you know about Lysa Crane," he said. "I don't know anything. She showed up 2 weeks ago, claimed a mate bond with Rowan, and he believed her. That necklace she was wearing," Kael said, "the one that shattered, that wasn't pack-made, and the way she collapsed when it broke, that's not natural." Dane's eyes narrowed. "You think she was spelled?" "I think she is a spell," Kael corrected, "or was being controlled by one. And now that the charm's broken, whatever was holding her together just unraveled." Sable's mind raced. If Lysa was under a spell, if the mate bond was fabricated, then everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks was a lie. Rowan hadn't chosen Lysa. He'd been manipulated. "Why?" she asked. "Why would someone do that?" Dane and Kael exchanged a look she couldn't read. "That," Dane said slowly, "is an excellent question." A knock interrupted them. Marcus Vale stood in the doorway, his expression dark. "Alpha, we have a problem. Rowan Cade is demanding answers, and he's not asking nicely." Dane's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" "Main hall, with about 30 pack members who all want to know what the hell just happened." This was spinning out of control. Sable could feel it, the pack's stability cracking, fear and suspicion spreading like poison. And somehow, she was at the center of it. Dane straightened, his alpha authority settling over him like armor. "Let's go handle this." They walked back into the night, toward a confrontation that felt inevitable and dangerous. And as they crossed the settlement square, Sable caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. Someone watching, someone who vanished the moment she turned to look. The feeling of being hunted settled deep in her bones and refused to let go. The main hall was packed, bodies pressed together in tight clusters, voices rising in overlapping waves of confusion and fear. Rowan stood at the center, wild-eyed and shaking, his hands clenched into fists. When Dane entered, the noise didn't stop. It intensified. "What the hell is happening to her?" Rowan shouted over the din. "What did you do?" Dane's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "I didn't do anything, and you need to calm down before you say something you'll regret." "Calm down? Lysa's in there dying, and nobody can tell me why." Rowan's gaze swept the room and landed on Sable. His expression twisted. "This started when you bonded with him, when you decided to—" "Rowan, stop." Kael moved between them, hands raised. "You're not thinking clearly." "No, I'm thinking fine. Better than I have in weeks, actually." Rowan's voice cracked. "Something's wrong. I can feel it, like I've been walking through fog and it just lifted and now I can see—" He pressed his palms against his temples. "I can't remember why I left Sable. I can't remember deciding that Lysa was my mate. It's like someone else made those choices and I just went along." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Marcus Vale stepped forward, his expression sharp. "Are you saying you were compelled?" Marcus asked. "Magically influenced?" "I don't know what I'm saying." Rowan's desperation was palpable. "All I know is that 2 weeks ago, my entire world made sense. I loved Sable. We were building a life, and then Lysa showed up, and everything changed, and now she's dying, and I don't even know who she is." Clara pushed through the crowd to stand beside Sable. "The necklace," she said loudly. "Did anyone else see it? That thing she wore constantly. It shattered when she collapsed. That's not coincidence." "What are you implying?" Marcus demanded. "I'm implying someone spelled Rowan, used dark magic to make him think Lysa was his mate." Clara's voice rang with conviction. "I've been saying something was wrong with her since she arrived. Nobody listened." The hall erupted in arguments. Some people shouted that magic was banned, that this was impossible. Others claimed they'd sensed something off about Lysa from the start. Dane let them argue for 30 seconds, then slammed his hand down on the nearest table hard enough to make the wood crack. "Enough!" Silence fell like a hammer. "Vera's examining Lysa now," Dane said, his tone allowing no argument. Until we know more, speculation is useless. Everyone go home. If there's a magical threat in this territory, I'll handle it. With all respect, Alpha, Thomas Wick spoke from the back of the room, his old voice carrying easily. If someone's using dark magic against pack members, this concerns all of us. We have a right to know what we're facing. You'll know when I know, Dane shot back. Right now, all we have are questions and panic. That combination gets people killed. Marcus stepped forward again, his expression calculating. Unless the Alpha already knows more than he's saying, unless this spell, if it exists, was targeting Sable specifically, to break her bond with Rowan, to clear the way for her to bond with you. The implication hung in the air like poison. Sable felt every eye in the room turn toward her, suspicion written across dozens of faces. That's insane, Kyle said flatly. Why would we orchestrate something this complicated when Sable could have just bonded with Dane anyway? Because the pack wouldn't have accepted it as easily, Marcus countered. But if Rowan left her first, if she appeared vulnerable and in need of protection, suddenly the bond seems reasonable, sympathetic even. You're reaching, Dane said, his voice dangerous. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, the only person who benefits from Rowan's broken bond is your new mate. Sable's hands curled into fists. The urge to defend herself warred with the knowledge that anything she said right now would sound like an excuse. Rowan was staring at her, and the look on his face cut deeper than Marcus's accusations. Did you know? He asked quietly. Did you know something was wrong with me and Lysa? I suspected, Sable admitted. Clara noticed things, the way Lysa smelled, the necklace, but I didn't know for sure until tonight. And you didn't tell me. You weren't exactly open to hearing it. You'd made your choice. A choice I didn't really make, Rowan's voice rose again. If someone spelled me, if they manipulated me into leaving you, don't you think I deserve to know? I didn't have proof, just suspicions. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Rowan, I think your new mate is actually a magical construct designed to ruin your life. The absurdity of it would have been funny in any other context. Here, it just felt hollow. The hall's door banged open. Vera Stone stood in the entrance, her expression grim and her hands stained with something dark that might have been blood. Dane, Kyle, I need you, now. They followed her out, Sable moving on instinct. Behind them, the hall erupted in renewed chaos. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of pine and coming rain. Vera led them to the medical cabin, a sturdy building on the settlement's western edge. Inside, the main room was lit by oil lamps that cast wavering shadows across walls lined with shelves of medicines and supplies. Lysa lay on the examination table so still she looked dead, but her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, and her eyes were open, staring at nothing. She's catatonic, Vera said, washing her hands in a basin. Her vitals are stable, but she's not responding to anything. No reaction to pain, light, sound. It's like she's trapped inside her own head. Can you bring her out of it? Dane asked. I don't know. This isn't a medical condition. It's magical. Vera dried her hands and turned to face them. I found marks on her skin. Symbols. They're fading now, but they were definitely there, burned into her flesh like brands. Old magic, the kind that hasn't been practiced openly in generations. Kyle leaned over Lysa, studying the barely visible marks on her collarbone. Binding runes, he said quietly. I've seen them in archived texts. They're used to control someone's will, override their natural instincts. Someone turned her into a puppet, Sable said, her stomach churning. Worse than a puppet, a weapon. Kale straightened. These runes aren't just about control. They're designed to trigger specific behaviors under specific conditions. Whoever created this wanted Lysa to do exactly what she did. Show up, claim a mate bond, drive a wedge between you and Rowan. Why? Sable demanded. Why go through all this trouble? Nobody answered, but the silence itself was damning. Dane's jaw tightened. We need to know who did this, and we need to know now. She might be able to tell us, Vera said, if we can break through the catatonia, but I'll need help. Someone with magical knowledge. Magic is banned in Thornridge, Marcus's voice came from the doorway. He stood there with Thomas Wick and Jonathan Cross, having followed them from the hall. Or have we forgotten that law? The law exists to prevent exactly this kind of attack, Dane said coldly. If bending it means finding whoever's responsible, I'll bend it. And if bending it opens doors we can't close? Thomas asked. Magic is dangerous, Alpha. Your predecessor learned that the hard way. I'm aware of the history. Then you know inviting a practitioner into pack territory is asking for trouble. We don't have a choice. Kael's voice was firm. Someone's already using magic against us. Fighting that without our own resources is suicide. The elders exchanged glances. Finally, Jonathan spoke. There's someone, he said reluctantly, north of here, about 2 days' travel. Lives alone in the deep woods. Calls herself Mara Blackwood. She's knowledgeable. A witch, Marcus said flatly. A practitioner, Jonathan corrected. She helped my daughter once, years ago, when conventional medicine failed. She's dangerous, but she's honest. If she agrees to help, she'll do it right. Dane considered this for a long moment. Kael, take 2 scouts and find her. Bring her back if she's willing. I'll go, Sable said. Everyone turned to stare at her. That's not necessary, Dane said. Yes, it is. If this spell was targeting me specifically, I need to be part of finding out why. Sable met his gaze steadily. And I'm not going to sit here while everyone whispers about whether I orchestrated this whole thing. Nobody thinks. Everyone thinks it, Sable cut him off. Marcus already said it out loud. Others are thinking it. Let me help fix this, or the suspicion will never go away. Dane looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded. Fine. You go with Kael, but you follow his lead, and if things get dangerous, you get out. Understand? Understood. Kael didn't look thrilled, but he didn't protest. We leave at first light, pack light. We'll be moving fast. The meeting dissolved. Sable found herself standing outside the medical cabin, watching pack members drift back to their homes in small, nervous clusters. The settlement felt different tonight, unstable, like ground that might crack open any second. Clara appeared at her elbow. You're really going into the deep woods to find a witch. Apparently, that's either the bravest thing you've ever done or the stupidest. Probably both. Clara studied her face in the lamplight spilling from nearby windows. Are you okay? Really? Sable thought about lying, but Clara deserved better. No, she said quietly. I'm terrified. Someone used magic to destroy my relationship, manipulate Rowan, and put me in a position where half the pack thinks I'm a schemer and the other half thinks I'm a victim. And now I'm bonded to an alpha who's still in love with a dead woman, carrying a baby nobody asked for, and about to walk into the wilderness to find someone who practices the exact kind of magic that got banned for killing people. When you put it like that, it does sound bad. Despite everything, Sable felt a ghost of a smile. Thanks for the support. Hey, I'm still here, aren't I? Clara squeezed her arm. And for what it's worth, I don't think you orchestrated anything. I think you're surviving. That's different. Tell that to Marcus. Marcus is an asshole who's been looking for an excuse to undermine Dane for years. Don't let him get in your head. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the settlement settle into uneasy sleep. Be careful out there, Clara said finally. The deep woods aren't like the territory. Things live out there that don't follow pack law, don't follow any law. I know. No, you don't. Not really. But you will. Clara hugged her quickly, fiercely. Come back in one piece, okay? I'll try. Sable barely slept that night. She lay in the unfamiliar bed in Dane's house, listening to floorboards creak as he moved around downstairs. Around 3 a.m, she gave up and got dressed, moving quietly down to the kitchen. Dane was already there, drinking coffee and studying a map spread across the table. He looked up when she entered, but didn't seem surprised. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. Too much to think about. Yeah, he gestured to the coffee pot. Help yourself. Sable poured a cup and sat across from him. The map showed Thornridge territory and the surrounding wilderness, hundreds of square miles of forest, mountains, and coastline marked with notes about game trails, water sources, and boundary markers. Kael will keep you safe, Dane said, still studying the map. He knows the deep woods better than anyone. If this Mara Blackwood can be found, he'll find her. You've never met her? No. Magic isn't my territory. I enforce the ban, but I don't hunt down every practitioner in the wilderness. As long as they stay out of pack business, I leave them alone. And now one of them is very much in pack business. Yeah. Dane's expression darkened. Someone went to a lot of trouble to break you and Rowan apart. I want to know why. Sable took a sip of coffee, gathering courage for a question she'd been avoiding. Kyle told me about Vera Cross. Dane went completely still. For a moment, Sable thought he might tell her to leave, to mind her own business, but instead he just said, "Did he? He thought I should know, before I bonded with you. And did it change your mind?" "No, but it helped me understand." Dane looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression was raw in a way she'd never seen before. "I loved her," he said quietly. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And when she died, it felt like someone had carved out everything inside me that knew how to feel. I've spent 15 years being functional, effective, but not whole." Sable's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." Dane folded the map with precise movements. "But you should know what you're getting into. I'm not going to wake up one day and suddenly be capable of the kind of bond you had with Rowan. That part of me is gone. I know. I'm not asking for it. Good, because I can't give it to you." He paused. "But I can keep you safe, and I can make sure your child has everything they need. That counts for something." "It counts for a lot," Sable said honestly. They sat in silence, drinking coffee as the sky outside began to lighten from black to deep blue. There was something almost peaceful about it. Two broken people sitting together in the pre-dawn quiet, not trying to fix each other, just existing in the same space. Then Dane said, "There's something else you should know. About the spell on Lissa." Sable set down her cup. "What?" "The binding runes Kyle identified. They require a specific catalyst, a connection to the target." Dane met her eyes. "Whoever cast that spell needed something of yours. Hair, blood, something personal, which means someone close to you was involved." The implication settled over her like ice water. "You think someone in the pack did this?" "I think someone gave the practitioner what they needed. Whether they knew what it would be used for," Dane shrugged. "That's what we need to find out." Sable's mind raced through possibilities. Who had access to her personal items? Who would want to destroy her relationship with Rowan badly enough to use dark magic? "We'll figure it out," Dane said, "but watch your back out there. If someone's willing to use magic to manipulate pack bonds, they might be willing to do worse." Kyle met her at the eastern tree line just after dawn. He'd brought two other scouts, Elena Frost, a lean woman in her 30s with quick eyes, and James Cutter, younger and built like a bull. Both nodded to Sable, but didn't waste time on pleasantries. 2 days there, maybe 3 back depending on what we find, Kale said, adjusting his pack. "We'll move fast. Avoid main trails. The deep woods don't forgive mistakes." They set out as the sun broke over the mountains, turning the forest floor golden. At first, the terrain was familiar, the same paths Sable had hunted for years. But as they moved deeper, the forest changed. Trees grew taller, their trunks wider, blocking out more light. The underbrush thickened. Animal sounds became stranger, less identifiable. By midday, they'd left all recognizable landmarks behind. "Stay close," Kyle called back. "And don't wander off the path. Things out here don't always follow normal rules." "What kind of things?" Sable asked. "The kind you don't want to meet." They traveled in silence after that, moving through wilderness that felt older and wilder than anything Sable had experienced. The air smelled different here, rich with decay and growth happening simultaneously, like the forest was constantly eating itself and being reborn. Elena dropped back to walk beside Sable. "First time in the deep woods?" "Yeah. You'll feel it soon. The weight, like the forest is watching." Elena's expression was matter of fact. "It is watching, by the way. Just don't react to it. Don't acknowledge it. Things out here feed on attention." "That's comforting." "Wasn't meant to be comforting. Was meant to keep you alive." They made camp that night in a small clearing, building a fire that felt too small against the surrounding darkness. The forest pressed in from all sides, and every sound seemed amplified. Branches cracking, leaves rustling, something large moving through underbrush just beyond the firelight. "Sleep in shifts," Kyle said. 2 up, 2 down. I'll take first watch with Elena." Sable tried to sleep but kept jerking awake at strange noises. Finally, she gave up and sat by the fire, watching shadows dance across tree trunks. James moved to sit beside her. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought. maybe 22, with the kind of nervous energy that came from not quite knowing what he was doing yet. "This your first deep woods run?" he asked. "That obvious?" "Little bit," he grinned. "Don't worry, Kyle knows what he's doing. We'll be fine." "You sound certain." "Have to be. Otherwise I'd be paralyzed with terror." James's grin widened. "I heard about your bond with the Alpha. Pretty bold move. Or desperate. Maybe both. But it takes guts either way." He paused. "For what it's worth, I don't think you orchestrated anything. Marcus Vale's just mad because he wanted his daughter to bond with Dane years ago and got turned down flat." Sable blinked. "I didn't know that. Most people don't. But yeah, Marcus has been nursing a grudge for a decade. He sees you as an outsider who got something his family deserved." "I'm not an outsider. I was born in Thornridge. You're not connected to the main families. Same thing in his eyes." James shrugged. "Pack politics are complicated. You'll get used to it." Movement in the trees made them both tense. Kyle was on his feet instantly, hand on his knife. But after a moment, the movement stopped, and the forest settled back into its uneasy quiet. "Get some sleep," Kyle said. "Both of you. We've got a long day tomorrow." The second day was harder. The terrain grew rougher, steep climbs over rocky outcroppings, dense thickets that had to be cut through, streams swollen with recent rain. Sable's legs burned, her lungs ached, but she kept pace. Showing weakness out here felt dangerous in ways she couldn't articulate. Late afternoon, they reached a gorge cut through solid rock by centuries of water flow. A rope bridge spanned the gap, old and frayed and swaying in the wind. "Are you kidding me?" Elena stared at the bridge. "This thing looks like it'll collapse if a bird lands on it." "Only way across," Kyle said, "unless you want to climb down and back up, which will add 6 hours we don't have." "I hate this job," Elena muttered, but she went first, testing each plank before putting her full weight on it. The bridge held. Barely. Sable crossed third, trying not to look down at the water churning 30 feet below. Halfway across, a plank cracked under her foot. She froze, heart hammering. "Don't stop," Kale called from behind her. "Keep moving." Sable took another step. The plank creaked, but held. Another step. Another. And then she was across, breathing hard, her hands shaking. James crossed last, moving with the careless confidence of youth. Kyle examined the bridge once they were all on solid ground. "Won't last much longer," he said. "Another season, maybe 2. Then it's gone." They pressed on. As the sun began to set, the forest opened into a clearing that felt different from natural spaces. Too circular, too perfect. In the center sat a cabin constructed from dark wood and river stones, smoke rising from its chimney. "That's it," Kyle said. Mara's place. They approached cautiously. The cabin's windows glowed with warm light, and something that smelled like cooking meat drifted from inside. Before they could knock, the door opened. The woman standing there was not what Sable expected. She'd imagined someone old, gnarled by years of solitary practice. But Mara Blackwood was maybe 40, with long dark hair streaked with silver and eyes that seemed to catch and hold light strangely. "Cale Thorne," Mara said, her voice carrying a faint accent Sable couldn't place. "It's been a while." "You know me?" "I know everyone who enters these woods, even those who think they're sneaking." Mara's gaze swept over the group and settled on Sable. "And you. You're the reason they're here," Sable's wolf bristled. "How did you— I can smell the spell residue clinging to you. Someone's been working magic in your vicinity. Recent. Powerful." Mara stepped back from the door. "You'd better come in. This is going to take a while." The cabin's interior was cluttered with the tools of her trade, dried herbs hanging from rafters, shelves lined with jars of unidentifiable substances, a workbench covered in books and instruments. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, and a pot of something savory bubbled over it. "Sit," Mara said, gesturing to chairs around a rough wooden table, "and tell me everything." Kyle explained, the sudden mate bond between Rowan and Lissa, the necklace shattering, the binding runes Vera had found. Mara listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly grim. "Binding magic," she said when Kyle finished. "Old style, forbidden in most circles for good reason. It's unstable and tends to shatter spectacularly when the anchor breaks." She looked at Sable. "You're lucky you weren't standing closer when that necklace broke. The backlash could have killed you." Can you tell who cast it? Sable asked. Maybe, but I'll need to examine the woman herself and the necklace fragments. We brought them. Kyle pulled a small cloth bundle from his pack and set it on the table. Inside were pieces of dark metal and shattered stone, still giving off a faint wrongness that made Sable's skin crawl. Mara unwrapped the bundle carefully, studying the fragments without touching them. After a moment, she pulled on thin leather gloves and lifted one piece, turning it in the firelight. Well crafted, she murmured. Whoever made this knows what they're doing. These aren't amateur symbols. They're precise, powerful, designed to override free will completely. She set the fragment down. To create something like this, the practitioner needed a powerful catalyst. Blood would work. Or bone. Something with strong genetic ties to the target. We think they used something of Sable's, Kyle said. Hair or blood, which means someone close to her was involved. Mara's eyes found Sable again, studying her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. There's something else, she said slowly. The spell wasn't just designed to break your bond with this Rowan person. It was designed to isolate you, make you vulnerable, push you toward a specific outcome. What outcome? I don't know yet, but whoever cast this wanted you in a very particular position. Mara stood and walked to a shelf, pulling down a leather-bound book. There's only one way to know for sure. I'll need to read the spell's intent, which means I'll need to see the woman it was cast on. She's 2 days away, Elena said. Catatonic in Thornridge's medical cabin. Then we'll go to her. Mara began gathering supplies, bottles, tools, small cloth bags that clinked mysteriously. If this spell is what I think it is, time matters. The longer she stays trapped in that catatonic state, the more likely her mind will break permanently. How soon can we leave? Kyle asked. Dawn. I'll need tonight to prepare. Mara glanced at Sable. You should rest. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're pregnant and running yourself ragged in the deep woods. That's not fine. That's stupid. Mara's tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. There's a spare room in the back. Use it. Get some actual sleep before we start back. Sable wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her. She nodded and let Mara show her to a small room with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the forest. She lay down, intending to rest for an hour, but sleep dragged her under almost immediately, pulling her into dreams that felt more real than they should. She was standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Storm clouds churned overhead, and waves crashed against rocks below with enough force to shake the ground. Someone stood at the cliff's edge, their back to her. A woman with long dark hair whipping in the wind. Mom? Sable called. The woman turned, but it wasn't her mother. It was someone else. Someone whose face Sable couldn't quite make out, blurred like a photograph taken during movement. You need to understand, the blurred woman said, her voice barely audible over the wind. None of this is accident. None of this is chance. You were always meant to be here. Where? What are you talking about? At the edge, where everything breaks. The woman gestured to the churning sea. That's where the truth lives. In the breaking. Thunder cracked overhead. Sable stumbled backward, and suddenly she was falling, the cliff crumbling beneath her feet, dark water rushing up to meet her. She woke gasping, her heart slamming against her ribs. Gray dawn light filtered through the window. She'd slept through the entire night. Voices drifted from the main room. Sable stood on shaking legs and walked out to find Mara, Kale, Elena, and James gathered around the table, studying a map. You're up, Kyle said. Good. We're leaving in 20 minutes. The journey back was faster, driven by urgency and Mara's surprising stamina. The witch moved through the forest with the confidence of someone who belonged there, who understood its rhythms and dangers instinctively. They made it back to Thornridge by late afternoon of the third day, exhausted and covered in mud. Dane met them at the tree line, his expression unreadable. You found her. I found you, Mara corrected, studying Dane with open curiosity. So you're the alpha who banned magic, younger than I expected. And you're the practitioner who agrees to help anyway. I'm the practitioner who doesn't like seeing my craft used to hurt people. Mara's tone hardened. Where's the victim? Vera had kept Lissa stable, but the woman's condition hadn't improved. She lay exactly as before, eyes open, staring at nothing, trapped inside her own mind. Mara circled the examination table slowly, studying Lisa from every angle. Then she pulled tools from her bag, crystals, a knife with symbols carved into the blade, small vials of liquid that glowed faintly in the lamplight. "Everyone out," she said. "Except the healer. I might need medical support." "I'm staying," Sable said. Mara looked at her sharply. "Why?" "Because this spell was cast because of me. I need to see what it was meant to do." After a moment, Mara nodded. "Fine, but stay quiet and don't interfere." Dane and Kale left reluctantly. Sable stood against the wall, watching as Mara began her work. The witch moved with precise, practiced efficiency, placing crystals at specific points around the table, pouring liquids that hissed when they touched air, chanting in a language Sable didn't recognize. The air in the cabin grew heavy, charged with energy that made Sable's wolf pace restlessly. Then Mara placed her hands on either side of Lissa's head and closed her eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Lissa's body arced off the table, a scream tearing from her throat, raw, agonized, inhuman. Vera grabbed her shoulders, holding her down while Mara maintained contact, sweat beading on her forehead. Images flickered in the air above the table, translucent, ghostly, but clear enough to see. Sable watched in horror as the spell's full design revealed itself. She saw Lissa's creation, not birth, but construction. Someone weaving magic and flesh together, building a person designed for a single purpose. She saw the binding runes being carved into skin, each one a command embedded so deep it became part of Lissa's identity. Seduce Rowan. Break the bond. Isolate Sable. And then she saw the final command, the one that made Sable's blood run cold. When Sable bonds with the Alpha, kill them both. The images shattered. Lissa collapsed back onto the table, gasping. Mara stumbled backward, pale and shaking. Vera caught her before she fell. "What?" Vera started. "She's not a person," Mara said hoarsely. "She's a weapon, and she's been activated." Lissa's eyes focused suddenly, fixing on Sable with terrifying clarity. And when she spoke, her voice was layered, multiple tones speaking in unison. "Too late," she whispered. "It's already done." Then her body began to dissolve, skin turning to ash, bones crumbling, the entire structure of her breaking down into nothing. Within seconds, all that remained was a pile of dark dust on the examination table and the fading echo of laughter that sounded like it came from very far away. Sable stood frozen, her mind refusing to process what she'd just witnessed. A weapon designed to kill her and Dane, a spell that had been activated the moment they bonded, which meant whoever cast it was still out there, watching, waiting. And they'd just announced their presence in the most terrifying way possible. The medical cabin's door burst open. Dane stood in the entrance, and the look on his face told Sable he'd heard Lissa's final words. "We need to talk," he said grimly. "Right now." But before anyone could move, a sound cut through the settlement. A horn blast, the pattern unmistakable. 3 short, 2 long. The signal for an attack. Dane's expression turned to stone. The northern boundary. Someone's breaching the territory. He ran, and Sable followed without thinking, her exhausted body finding reserves she didn't know she had. Behind them, Kael was shouting orders, mobilizing defenders. They reached the northern boundary as full dark fell. What Sable saw there made her stop dead. The breach wasn't raiders or a rival pack. It was Rowan, standing at the territory line with blood on his hands and a wild, broken expression on his face. "I remember," he shouted across the divide. "I remember everything, what she was, what I did." His eyes found Sable. "And I know who's responsible. I know who gave them what they needed to cast the spell." "Who?" Dane demanded. Rowan's answer was a name Sable never expected to hear, a name that changed everything she thought she understood about the past 2 weeks, a name that belonged to someone standing right behind her. The betrayal hit like a physical blow, and in that moment of shock, something else hit harder, pain, sharp and sudden, radiating from her abdomen. Sable looked down and saw blood spreading across her shirt. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Rowan screaming her name and the sound of her own body hitting the ground. Pain dragged Sable back to consciousness in jagged waves. Her abdomen felt like someone had driven knives into it and was twisting them slowly. She tried to open her eyes, but her lids were too heavy, weighted down by exhaustion and trauma. Voices filtered through the fog, urgent, overlapping, Some she recognized and some she didn't. Internal bleeding. I need to get her stabilized first. The baby. That word cut through everything else. The baby. Sable's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, finding bandages wrapped tight around her middle. Panic surged, sharp and clarifying. She's waking up, someone said. Vera's voice, strained but steady. Sable forced her eyes open. She was back in the medical cabin, lamplight casting shadows across wooden beams overhead. Vera leaned over her, hands stained with blood. Sable's blood, she realized distantly. Don't try to move, Vera said. You've been hurt badly. The baby, Sable managed, her voice barely a rasp. Vera's expression softened. Still there, still fighting, but Sable, you're bleeding internally. Whatever hit you wasn't a weapon, Mara's voice came from somewhere to the left. Was a curse, triggered when specific conditions were met. Sable turned her head with effort. Mara sat in a chair against the wall, looking exhausted and grim. The witch's hands were covered in symbols drawn in what looked like ash or charcoal. What happened? Sable asked. You collapsed at the northern boundary, Vera said, checking Sable's pulse. Rowan carried you back here. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. 6 hours. Sable's mind struggled to process. She remembered Rowan standing at the territory line, blood on his hands, shouting a name. The name of someone who'd betrayed her, but she couldn't remember who. The memory slipped away like water through fingers. Who? She asked. Rowan said a name. Who was it? Vera and Mara exchanged glances. Neither answered. The door opened and Dane entered, his expression carved from stone. Blood spattered his shirt. Not his own, Sable noted. Behind him came Kyle, looking equally dangerous. You're awake, Dane said, crossing to the bed in 3 strides. His eyes swept over her, cataloging injuries with clinical precision. Then something in his face shifted, just slightly, and Sable saw genuine fear there before he locked it away again. What happened? Sable repeated, her voice stronger now. Rowan named someone. I need to know who. Dane pulled up a chair and sat, his movements deliberate. Clara Moss. The name hit like a second curse. Sable's breath caught, her mind rejecting the information automatically. No, that's not. Clara wouldn't. She confessed, Kael said quietly. After we brought you back here, Rowan confronted her, and she broke down. Why? The question came out broken. Clara had been her closest friend since childhood, the one person she'd trusted without reservation. Why would she do this? Because she's been in love with Rowan for 15 years, Dane said, his tone flat and factual. And when he chose you instead, it destroyed her. She spent years watching you two together, smiling and pretending to be happy for you while something inside her festered. Sable felt like the ground had opened beneath her. All those years of friendship, of shared secrets and support, had any of it been real? She made contact with a practitioner 6 months ago, Kyle continued. Someone who promised they could break your bond with Rowan if she provided what they needed. Hair from your brush, blood from a cut you got hunting. Clara was the one who bandaged it, remember? Sable did remember. 3 months ago, she'd sliced her palm on a broken branch. Clara had insisted on cleaning and wrapping it, had been almost obsessive about collecting all the bloody cloths afterward. At the time, Sable had thought she was just being careful about attracting predators. The practitioner created Lissa using your blood as an anchor, Mara said. That's why the false mate bond worked so well on Rowan. It was built from Sable's genetic material. His body recognized it as familiar, as right, even though his mind knew something was wrong. And the curse? Sable's hand pressed against her bandaged abdomen. The one that triggered when I bonded with Dane? Clara didn't know about that part, Dane said. According to her, she just wanted to break you and Rowan apart, give herself a chance to be the one he turned to. But the practitioner she hired had other plans. They added a secondary spell, one designed to kill you and me both once we bonded. Who? Sable demanded. Who was the practitioner? We don't know yet. Clara only met them once in the deep woods. They wore a mask, used a voice modifier. Could have been anyone. Dane's jaw tightened. But they're still out there, and they won't stop until the curse is complete. Sable tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her torso, forcing her back down. Vera's hands were immediately there, gentle but firm. You need to stay still, Vera said. The bleeding stopped for now, but if you tear the internal wounds, how long until I can move? Sable cut her off. Days, maybe a week. I don't have a week, Sable looked at Dane. If there's a curse designed to kill us, lying in bed makes me an easy target. Which is why you're under constant guard, Dane said. Kale, Elena, and James are rotating shifts. Nobody gets near you without clearance. And Clara? Confined, under guard in one of the storage buildings. Dane's expression darkened. The council wants her exiled immediately. Some are calling for worse. Sable thought about Clara's face the last time she'd seen her. Concerned, supportive, encouraging. All of it a lie. Or maybe not a lie exactly, but something more complicated. Love and resentment twisted together until you couldn't separate them. I want to see her, Sable said. Everyone in the room turned to stare at her. That's not a good idea, Kale said carefully. I don't care. I need to hear it from her. Why she did it. What she thought would happen. Dane studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but not today. You're too weak, and when you do see her, I'm coming with you. Okay. Vera checked Sable's bandages, her movements efficient but gentle. The internal damage is healing, but slowly. Whatever curse hit you, it was designed to cause maximum harm without immediately killing you. Mara's been working to counter it, but it's strong magic. Can it be broken? Sable asked, looking at the witch. Mara's expression was thoughtful. Maybe, but not easily. The curse is tied to your bond with Dane. It feeds on that connection. As long as you're bonded, it'll keep trying to fulfill its purpose. So we dissolve the bond, Sable said immediately. No. Dane's voice was absolute. That's exactly what whoever casts this wants. They break the bond, you're vulnerable again, and then they finish what they started. Better than both of us dying. I said no. The finality in his tone left no room for argument. Sable wanted to fight it, to point out that his life mattered more than hers in the pack hierarchy. But exhaustion was pulling at her again, dragging her toward unconscious darkness. Sleep, Vera said softly. Your body needs time to heal. Sable's eyes drifted closed against her will. The last thing she heard was Dane's voice, low and tight, with something that might have been fear. Find that practitioner. I don't care what it takes. The next time Sable woke, pale dawn light filtered through the cabin's windows. Her abdomen still hurt, but the pain had dulled from knives to a deep, persistent ache. She could breathe without feeling like her insides were tearing. Kyle sat in the chair beside her bed, reading a book. He looked up when she stirred. Morning, he said. How are you feeling? Like I got kicked by a horse, repeatedly. Close enough. Kale set aside the book. Vera says if you can keep food down today, you might be able to sit up tomorrow. Thrilling. Despite the sarcasm, Sable felt a flicker of gratitude. Kyle could have been anywhere, managing security, hunting for the practitioner, sleeping off the exhaustion of the past few days. Instead, he was here, keeping watch over someone who'd barely known him a week ago. Why are you doing this? She asked. Doing what? Protecting me. You don't owe me anything. Kale considered the question seriously. Dane's my brother. You're bonded to him, which makes you Pack. And Pack protects its own. Even when half the Pack thinks I'm a manipulative schemer. Especially then. Those people are idiots. Kale's expression softened slightly. Besides, you stood up to the council. You went into the deep woods to find answers instead of hiding behind Dane's authority. That takes spine. I respect spine. A knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Rowan, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes wrinkled, and his hand shook slightly as he gripped the doorframe. Kyle stood immediately, positioning himself between Rowan and Sable's bed. You weren't cleared to be here. I know. I don't care. Rowan's gaze found Sable over Kale's shoulder. Please, I need to talk to her. Sable should have said no. Should have let Kale throw him out. But something in Rowan's expression, broken and desperate and drowning in guilt, made her relent. It's okay, she told Kyle. Give us a minute. Kale looked like he wanted to argue but finally nodded. I'll be right outside. Yell if you need me. He left, closing the door behind him. Rowan stood frozen for a moment, then crossed the room slowly, like he was approaching something fragile that might shatter. I'm so sorry, he said, the words tumbling out. Sable, I'm so sorry. For everything. For leaving you. For believing the false bond. For not seeing what Clara was doing. Rowan. No, let me finish, please. He sank into the chair Cale had vacated, his face anguished. I've spent the past 3 days remembering everything. What it felt like when Lissa showed up, like someone had reached into my head and rewritten who I was. I fought it at first. I knew something was wrong, but the spell was so strong, and every time I tried to question it, the compulsion just got worse. It wasn't your fault, Sable said quietly. Wasn't it? I chose to trust the feeling instead of trusting you. I chose to believe I could just fall in love with someone else overnight instead of questioning why that made no sense. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. And Clara. I've been replaying every interaction I had with her over the past few months. The way she'd casually ask how we were doing, if I was happy, if I ever thought about what it would be like with someone else. I thought she was just being a friend, making conversation. She was gathering intelligence, Sable realized, figuring out how strong our bond was, where the weaknesses were. Yeah, Rowan's voice cracked. And I gave her everything she needed, told her about our fights, our insecurities, the things that frustrated me, handed her a roadmap for destroying us. Sable wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for being so blind, so easily manipulated. But looking at his broken expression, all she felt was tired. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. The bond's gone. The spell saw to that. Whatever we had, it's just ashes now. Rowan met her eyes, and the pain there was genuine. But I need you to know that it was real. Before Lysa, before the spell, what we had was real. I loved you. I still love you, in whatever broken way I'm capable of now. I know, Sable said, and realized it was true. The love had been real. The bond had been real. The spell had just torn it apart and scattered the pieces too far to ever put back together. I heard about the baby, Rowan continued, that it's mine, biologically. Sable's hand moved to her bandaged stomach protectively. Legally, it's Dane's. That's not changing. I know, and I'm not asking for rights or involvement, but if you ever need anything, resources, support, someone to help, I'll be there. No strings, no expectations, just because I owe you that much. It was probably the most mature thing Rowan had ever said to her. Sable felt something in her chest loosen slightly, some knot of anger and hurt unwinding just enough to breathe around. Thank you, she said. Rowan nodded and stood. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I think you and Dane might actually work. You're both too stubborn to quit, and too damaged to expect perfection. That's a better foundation than most bonds get. He left before Sable could respond. She lay in the silence, processing everything, feeling the shape of her new reality settling into place. The door opened again. This time it was Dane, carrying a tray with soup and bread. Vera says you need to eat, he said, setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. I'm under strict orders not to leave until you've had at least half. You don't have to babysit me. I'm not babysitting. I'm following healer's orders. Dane pulled up the chair. Besides, we need to talk about what happens next. Sable managed to sit up with minimal wincing and accepted the bowl of soup. It smelled like chicken and herbs, warming and familiar. Mara thinks she's found a way to neutralize the curse, Dane said, but it requires finding the practitioner who cast it. Their magical signature is woven into the spell. If we can get them to reverse it willingly or break their connection to it by force, the curse should dissolve. How do we find them? That's the problem. Clara only met them once, and she can't give us enough detail to track them. They're a ghost. Dane's frustration was evident. But Mara has another idea, a tracking spell that uses the curse itself as a thread back to its source. That sounds dangerous. It is. The spell requires using you as an anchor, essentially following the curse's connection from victim back to caster. If it works, we find them. If it doesn't, Dane trailed off. It could make things worse, Sable finished. Yeah. Sable took a spoonful of soup, thinking. Every option felt like gambling with lives she couldn't afford to lose, but sitting here waiting for the curse to kill them both wasn't an option either. Do it, she said. The tracking spell. Whatever it takes. You don't have to decide right now. You're still healing. I'm deciding now. Because the longer we wait, the more time that practitioner has to plan their next move. They wanted us dead, Dane. They went to incredible lengths to make that happen. I don't think they're going to just give up because the first attempt failed. Dane studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his expression. You're tougher than I gave you credit for. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Is there? Sable thought about her mother, drowning in a storm because nobody was there to help her. Thought about the years she'd spent building a life with Rowan, only to watch it disintegrate overnight. Thought about the choice she'd made to propose to Dane, desperate and calculating and brave all at once. Yeah, she said finally. Tough is something you are. Surviving is something you do. I've been doing it my whole life. Dane's expression shifted into something Sable couldn't quite read. Then quietly he said, So have I. The admission hung between them. Two people who'd learned to survive instead of live, now bound together by circumstance and magic and a mutual understanding that comfort was a luxury neither could afford. When does Mara want to do the tracking spell? Sable asked. Tomorrow night. She needs time to prepare, and you need time to heal enough that the spell won't kill you outright. Optimistic. Realistic. Dane stood. Get some rest. I'll have Kale bring you dinner later. He left, and Sable finished her soup in silence, watching light move across the cabin's walls as the sun climbed higher. Her hand drifted to her stomach again, feeling the subtle roundness there that hadn't been present a month ago. We're going to get through this, she whispered. I promise. The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Vera checked Sable's wounds every few hours, changing bandages and administering herbs that dulled the pain. By afternoon, Sable could sit up without help and walk to the washroom with only minor discomfort. Clara arrived as sunset painted the sky orange and purple. Two guards escorted her, their expressions neutral but watchful. Clara looked smaller than Sable remembered, diminished by guilt or confinement or both. Dane stood near the door, arms crossed, his presence a clear warning. But he didn't speak, letting Sable control the conversation. For a long moment, the two women just looked at each other. Finally, Clara broke the silence. I know you hate me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't hate you, Sable replied. I don't know what I feel. Betrayed, definitely. Angry, confused. She paused. Why, Clara? We were friends. I trusted you. I know. Tears spilled down Clara's face. And that made it worse. Because every time you trusted me, every time you came to me for support or advice, all I could think was that you had everything I wanted. Rowan loved you. You were building a future together. And I was just the friend. Always the friend, never the choice. So you destroyed it, Sable said flatly. Instead of dealing with your feelings like an adult, you hired someone to rip apart my life. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Clara's voice rose, desperate. I just wanted the bond broken. I thought if Rowan was free, if he could see me differently, but then Lissa showed up, and she was wrong, and I tried to warn you. You tried to warn me after you'd already set everything in motion. That doesn't make you noble, Clara. It makes you a coward. The words hit like slaps. Clara flinched but didn't argue. Did you know about the death curse? Sable asked. The one designed to kill me and Dane? No, I swear I didn't know. The practitioner said they'd create a false bond, make Rowan believe it was real, and that would be enough. They never mentioned anything about killing anyone. Sable wanted to believe her, but trust, once shattered, was almost impossible to rebuild. What did you pay them? Dane asked from his position by the door. A spell that complex doesn't come cheap. Claire's face flushed. Everything I had, my savings, some jewelry that belonged to my grandmother, and she hesitated. Information. What kind of information? Dane's voice went dangerous. About the pack, territory maps, guard rotations, where the alpha lives, what his habits are. Clara's voice dropped to almost nothing. They said they needed to understand pack dynamics to make the spell work properly. I didn't think, you gave a hostile practitioner detailed intelligence about Thornridge security, Dane said, his tone lethal. Do you have any idea what you've done? Clara was openly sobbing now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sable felt exhausted, not physically, though that too, but emotionally. There was no satisfaction in watching Clara break down, no sense of justice or closure, just a hollow ache where their friendship used to be. I need you to describe the practitioner, Sable said. Everything you remember, voice, build, anything distinctive. Clara wiped her eyes, struggling for composure. They were tall, maybe 6 feet, wore a long cloak with a hood that covered their face. When they spoke, it was like multiple voices layered together, unnatural. They met me in the deep woods near an old lightning-struck oak, said they'd been watching the pack for months, waiting for the right opportunity. Watching, Dane repeated. Did they say why they were interested in Thornridge? No, but they knew things about you, about Sable, about pack history. They mentioned Vera Cross. The name made Dane go rigid. What about her? Just that her death 15 years ago was unfortunate but necessary, that it had served a purpose. Clara looked between them, confused by their reactions. Who was Vera Cross? None of your business, Dane said coldly. He turned to the guards. Take her back. I'm done here. Clara reached toward Sable as they led her away. I really am sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but no, Sable cut her off. It doesn't. The door closed behind them. Sable and Dane stood in silence, processing Clara's revelation. They mentioned Vera, Dane said finally, his voice tight, which means this isn't random. Whoever's doing this has been planning it for 15 years, since before I became Alpha. What purpose could her death have served? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That night, Mara performed the tracking spell in the medical cabin's main room. She'd cleared away furniture, creating an open space where she drew symbols on the floor in white ash. Candles burned at specific points, their flames unnaturally still despite the draft. Sable sat in the center of the circle, her heart hammering. Dane stood just outside it, close enough to intervene if needed. Kale watched from the doorway, hand on his knife. This will hurt, Mara warned. The curse is going to resist being traced. It'll fight back, try to protect its source. I understand, Sable said. Mara began chanting in that same unfamiliar language she'd used with Lissa. The candle flames grew brighter, their light taking on a strange blue-white quality. The air in the room thickened, pressing against Sable's skin like water. Then the pain started. It felt like the curse was awakening inside her, clawing its way through her organs, searching for a way out. Sable bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood, refusing to scream. Images flickered behind her eyes, fragments of memory that weren't hers. A figure in a dark cloak standing on a cliff in a storm. Hands weaving magic into flesh, creating something that looked like Lissa but wasn't yet complete. And underneath it all, a voice whispering in that same layered tone Clara had described. Patience. The Alpha must be made vulnerable. The bond must form before it can be broken. The images shifted. Sable saw herself and Dane, saw their bond forming, saw the curse activating like a ticking bomb embedded in their connection. And then she saw the cliff again, closer this time, and the figure turned slightly, their face still hidden, but something about their build, their movements, suddenly familiar. The spell snapped like a breaking rope. Sable gasped, the vision dissolving. Mara stumbled backward, breathing hard. Did you see them? Dane demanded. Did you see who it was? I saw... Sable struggled to articulate what she'd witnessed. I saw the cliff. The same cliff from my dream, where my mother died. Dane's expression went carefully blank. Your mother drowned 15 years ago. In a storm. Off the northern cliffs. Sable looked at him, pieces clicking into place. The same cliffs where Vera Cross died. The same storm. That's not possible. The storm killed a dozen people across 2 territories. It was a natural disaster. Was it? Mara's voice was grim. Because what I just saw in that tracking spell looked a lot like weather magic. Old, powerful weather magic designed to look natural. The implications settled over the room like ice. Someone killed Vera deliberately, Kale said slowly, made it look like an accident, and Sable's mother was collateral damage. But why? Sable asked. What did Vera's death accomplish? Dane's face had gone ashen. It broke me. I was supposed to challenge for Alpha that week. After Vera died, I almost didn't. I was so destroyed, so lost that I barely functioned. And when I did challenge, I won through rage and grief, not strategy. I killed the old Alpha in single combat instead of negotiating a transition. It was brutal, traumatic for the pack. Exactly what someone would want if they were trying to destabilize Thornridge, Kyle said. And now they're trying again, Mara added. Using the same tactics, break bonds, create chaos, make the Alpha vulnerable. Sable's mind raced. Whoever did this has been planning for 15 years. They killed Vera to break Dane. They killed my mother as collateral, and now they're trying to kill both of us to finish what they started. This isn't just about power, Dane said, his voice rough. This is personal. Someone has a vendetta against me, against Thornridge, and they've been patient enough to wait over a decade to see it through. The question is who? Kyle said. Mara was studying the ash symbols on the floor, frowning. The tracking spell gave me something, a direction, northeast maybe 50 miles into the deep woods. There's an old pack outpost there, abandoned 20 years ago after a fire. If I had to guess, that's where your practitioner is hiding. Then that's where we're going, Dane said immediately. You're not going anywhere, Vera's voice came from the doorway. The healer looked furious. Sable nearly died 3 days ago. She needs at least another week of rest before she's ready for any kind of travel, let alone a confrontation with a hostile magic user. We don't have a week, Sable said. Every day we wait gives them time to activate another contingency, to hurt more people. And rushing in half-healed gets you killed, which helps nobody. Vera's right, Dane said, though the admission clearly cost him. We need a plan, a real one, not a suicide run. They spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Kale would lead a scouting party to the abandoned outpost, gather intelligence without engaging. Mara would work on counterspells and protective wards. Dane would quietly mobilize the pack's best fighters without causing panic. And Sable would heal. As much as she hated it, Vera was right. She was no use to anyone dead. Over the following days, Sable's strength returned faster than expected. Vera attributed it to youth and stubbornness in equal measure. By the end of the week, Sable could walk the settlement without pain and had started light training to rebuild her stamina. Kyle returned from scouting with confirmation. Someone was living at the old outpost, and they were definitely using magic. The place was warded heavily enough that getting close was nearly impossible without triggering alarms. We'll need to go in force, Kyle reported during a strategy meeting. At least a dozen fighters, plus Mara to handle the magical defenses. That risks open warfare, Marcus Vale objected. The elder had been included in planning reluctantly, his suspicion of Sable barely concealed. If we attack in force and fail, we've shown our hand. And if we do nothing, we're sitting targets, Dane shot back. The arguments continued. But slowly, a consensus formed. They would strike at the outpost in 3 days, giving Sable time to fully recover and Mara time to prepare her counterspells. On the second night, Dane found Sable on the porch of his house, watching stars emerge through a break in the clouds. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Too much to think about. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Dane said, I've been thinking about what you said, about surviving versus being tough. Yeah? I've spent 15 years surviving, going through the motions, being an effective alpha without actually living. He turned to look at her. But watching you these past weeks, the way you face down the council, make impossible decisions, keep fighting even when everything's falling apart, it's made me realize that survival isn't enough anymore. Sable didn't know what to say to that, so she just waited. When we go after this practitioner, Dane continued, I need you to promise me something. If it comes down to a choice between saving you or saving me, you choose yourself, you and the baby. Promise me. I can't promise that. Sable, no. She turned to face him fully. We're bonded, Dane. Maybe it started as a transaction, but it's real now. Pack law, magic, whatever, it's real, and I don't abandon my people, not even to save myself. Something in Dane's expression cracked open, just for a moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. Okay, he said quietly. Then we both make it out. Deal? Deal. 3 days later, they rode toward the abandoned outpost with 12 fighters and a witch who'd promised to level the playing field. Sable rode beside Dane, her body healed enough to fight, her mind focused on the confrontation ahead. The outpost appeared through morning mist, a cluster of burned buildings slowly being reclaimed by forest. But one structure stood intact, and from it came a presence that made Sable's wolf bristle with recognition. Mara dismounted and began working on the wards, her hands moving through complex patterns. One by one, the magical barriers fell away like melting ice. Whatever's in there knows we're here, she said. They're waiting. Dane drew his weapon, a long knife that had seen decades of use. Around him, the other fighters did the same. Sable stays back, Dane ordered. Like hell, Sable countered. Sable sighed. Before he could argue, the outpost's door opened. A figure emerged, tall and cloaked just as Clara had described. But as they stepped into the light, they pulled back their hood, revealing a face Sable knew. A face that should have been dead 15 years. Vera Cross stood before them, alive and impossibly young, her eyes burning with power and madness. "Hello, Dane," she said, her voice layered with that same unnatural resonance. "I've been waiting for you to figure it out." The world narrowed to a single impossible point. Vera Cross, dead 15 years, drowned in a storm that had haunted Dane's nightmares ever since, stood before them alive, ageless, and radiating power that made the air itself feel heavy. Dane's knife clattered to the ground. The sound echoed across the clearing like a gunshot. "No," he said, the word barely audible. "You're dead. I found your body. I buried you." "You buried a shell," Vera replied, her voice carrying that same layered quality that had characterized Lissa. "A constructed corpse designed to break you, and it worked beautifully." Kale moved to Dane's side, weapon still drawn. "What the hell is this?" "This is 15 years of patience coming to fruition." Vera's gaze swept across the assembled fighters with something like amusement. "You brought an army to face me. How flattering." Sable's mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman standing before them with the story Kael had told her, the lost love, the tragic death, the alpha who'd never recovered. "Why?" Dane's voice cracked on the word. "If you were alive, if you wanted to leave, why not just leave? Why fake your death? Why spend 15 years destroying everything?" "Because you were never supposed to become alpha," Vera said simply. "That position was meant for someone else. Someone who understood that power without magic is just brute force. But you challenged anyway, won anyway, and then spent 15 years enforcing a ban on the very thing that makes us more than animals." "The magic ban exists to protect the pack," Dane said. "The magic ban exists because you're afraid. Afraid of anything you can't control with teeth and claws." Vera stepped closer, and several fighters raised their weapons instinctively. "I spent 2 years with you, Dane. 2 years trying to show you that magic could strengthen Thornridge, make us untouchable. And you refused. Called it dangerous, unnatural, said you'd never allow it in your territory. So you decided to punish him," Sable said, finding her voice. "Punish the entire pack for his choices." Vera's attention shifted to her, and Sable felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure. "You, the little catalyst. Do you know what you are, Sable Arden? Do you understand what role you've played?" "I'm the person you tried to kill multiple times. That's all I need to understand." "You're the genetic key," Vera corrected. "Your bloodline carries something rare, a natural resistance to compulsion magic. It's why the spell on Rowan needed your blood to work. Your DNA told his body to trust the false bond, even while his mind screamed that something was wrong." Sable's wolf stirred uneasily. "I don't have any special bloodline. Your mother did. She was born in the Western Territories where magic flows stronger. When she died in that storm, my storm, I thought the line had ended, but then you grew up, bonded with Rowan, and I realized you were the perfect tool." Vera smiled, and it was terrible. "Break your bond, isolate you, push you toward Dane, make him care about someone again after 15 years of emotional numbness, and then kill you both, breaking him permanently this time." "You're insane," Kael said flatly. "I'm patient. There's a difference." Vera raised her hands, and energy crackled around her fingers, blue-white lightning that smelled like ozone and burning. "I've spent 15 years building power, studying magic that most practitioners won't touch, waiting for the exact right moment to dismantle everything Dane built. And that moment is now." "Why tell us all this?" Mara asked, stepping forward. The witch's hands were moving in subtle patterns, building her own defensive magic. "If you're so powerful, why not just attack?" "Because I want him to understand." Vera's gaze locked onto Dane. "I want you to know that every decision you made, every life you tried to protect by banning magic, it all led here, to this moment, to your complete failure." Dane had picked up his knife. His hands were steady now, his expression settling into the cold calculation Sable recognized from council meetings. The initial shock was fading, replaced by something harder. "You killed innocent people," he said. "Sable's mother. The others in that storm. They had nothing to do with your vendetta. Collateral damage. Unfortunate, but necessary. You manipulated Rowan, created Lysa, turned Clara against her closest friend. Tools. All of them. Means to an end." "You're right about one thing," Dane said quietly. "I am afraid of magic. Because people like you prove why it's dangerous. It's not the power itself. It's what people become when they have it. Arrogant, cruel, willing to sacrifice anyone and anything for their goals." "You self-righteous—" "I'm not finished," Dane's voice cut through her building anger like a blade. "You think you broke me 15 years ago. Maybe you did. But I rebuilt. Created something stable and strong that's protected this pack through everything. And you've spent 15 years festering in the woods, nursing your hatred, becoming exactly the kind of monster you accused me of fearing." Vera's expression twisted. "I loved you. No. You loved the idea of controlling me, of shaping me into what you wanted. And when I wouldn't bend, you decided to break me instead." Dane's grip on his knife tightened. "Well, here I am, still standing, still alpha, still protecting my people. Your 15 years of patience accomplished nothing except proving you were never worth my grief." The words hit harder than any weapon could. Sable saw Vera flinch, saw rage and hurt flash across her face before being swallowed by something darker. "Then let's finish this," Vera said, her voice gone cold. She raised her hands and the world exploded. Lightning arced from Vera's fingertips, branching across the clearing in deadly patterns. Fighters scattered, several screaming as electricity found them. Mara threw up a shield that caught most of the blast, but the force drove her to her knees. Dane ran at Vera, closing the distance with terrifying speed. But Vera was ready. She gestured sharply and the ground between them erupted, throwing Dane backward. He hit the dirt hard, rolling with the impact. Sable moved on instinct, running not toward the fight, but toward the intact building behind Vera. If the witch had been living here for years, there had to be something inside, spell components maybe, or the anchor for her power. "Where are you going?" Kael shouted, engaging Vera from the side to draw her attention. Sable didn't answer. She hit the building's door at full speed, her shoulder connecting with old wood that splintered under the impact. Inside, the space was dim and cluttered, tables covered in magical paraphernalia, shelves lined with jars and books, symbols drawn on every available surface. And in the center, glowing with sickly green light, was a crystal the size of Sable's fist suspended in a web of energy. Sable had no idea what it was, but instinct screamed that it was important. She grabbed a metal rod from one of the tables and swung it at the crystal with everything she had. The rod connected. The crystal shattered. The explosion threw Sable backward through the doorway, her body hitting the ground so hard her vision went white. Sound became muffled, distant. Through ringing ears, she heard Vera screaming, not words, just raw fury and pain. When Sable's vision cleared, she saw Vera on her knees, the blue-white energy around her hands flickering and dying. The layered quality of her voice was gone, leaving just normal human sound. "What did you do?" Vera gasped, staring at Sable with something like horror. "That was 15 years of accumulated power." "And now it's broken," Sable said, forcing herself to her feet. Her entire body hurt, but she was alive. "Just like you tried to break us." Dane was there suddenly, pulling Sable back as Mara rushed forward. The witch's hands moved in complex patterns, weaving binding magic around Vera. The once powerful practitioner struggled, but without her stolen power, she was just a woman against overwhelming odds. "It's over," Mara said, tying off the final binding. "She's contained." The clearing fell silent except for heavy breathing and the crackle of fading magic. Fighters picked themselves up slowly, checking for injuries. Elena had a burned arm. James was bleeding from a cut above his eye. But everyone was alive. Dane turned to Sable, his hands gripping her shoulders, checking her for damage. "That was incredibly stupid. It worked. You could have been killed. So could you. So could all of us." Sable met his eyes. "I made a choice. Same as you taught me." Something in Dane's expression softened. Then, without warning, he pulled her into a fierce embrace. It lasted only a moment before he stepped back, composure sliding back into place. But Sable felt the tremor in his hands, saw the fear he'd been hiding. "Thank you," he said quietly. Vera laughed, a broken, bitter sound. How touching. The broken alpha and his desperate mate. You think this is a happy ending? I think it's an ending, Dane said. That's enough. They bound Vera thoroughly and began the journey back to Thornridge. It took 2 full days, moving slowly with an exhausted, injured group. Vera said nothing the entire time, her expression cycling between rage and something that might have been grief. When they reached the settlement, the entire pack turned out to see what they'd brought back. The sight of Vera, alive, captured, stripped of power, sent shockwaves through the crowd. Dane called an emergency gathering that night. The main hall filled to capacity, people pressing in from all sides to hear what had happened. Standing before them, Dane laid out the truth. All of it. Vera's survival, her 15-year plan, the magic she'd used to manipulate and destroy, Clara's unwitting participation, the curse designed to kill both Sable and Dane. For 15 years, Dane said, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed hall, I believed Vera Cross drowned in a storm. I grieved her. Let that grief shape every decision I made as Alpha. The magic ban, the isolation, the refusal to bond. All of it came from trying to protect this pack from the kind of pain I'd experienced. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. But Vera didn't drown. She staged her death to break me, to make me vulnerable. And then she spent 15 years trying to finish what she started, destroying Thornridge from the shadows. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus Vale stood, his expression skeptical. That's a convenient story, Marcus said. But how do we know it's true? How do we know this isn't just an excuse to consolidate your power? Before Dane could respond, Mara stepped forward. Because I've examined the magical residue, traced the spells back to their source. Everything the Alpha said is verifiable. She pulled out a cloth bundle and unwrapped it, revealing fragments of the crystal Sable had shattered. This was a power anchor, 15 years of stolen magic compressed into physical form. When it broke, Vera lost everything she'd built. And where did that power come from? Thomas Wick asked from his seat near the front. From death, Mara said bluntly. The storm that killed a dozen people wasn't natural. It was summoned, and every death fed power into Vera's anchor, including Sable's mother. A collective intake of breath. Sable felt eyes turning toward her, sympathy and horror mixing in equal measure. My mother died because Vera needed power to destroy Dane, Sable said, her voice steady despite the pain in her chest. She was collateral damage in a vendetta that had nothing to do with her, just like all the others who died that night. And Clara Moss? Lydia Marsh asked. What's her role in all this? Manipulated, Dane said. Vera found someone vulnerable, someone carrying pain and resentment, and gave her a way to act on it. Clara's guilty of terrible judgment and betrayal. But she was a tool, not the architect. What happens to them? Jonathan Cross wanted to know. Vera and Clara both? The council will decide Clara's fate, Dane said, but given her cooperation and genuine remorse, I'm recommending probation and community service rather than exile. Marcus looked ready to object, but Thomas Wick spoke first. Agreed. The girl made a mistake. A terrible one, but she's young enough to learn from it. And Vera? Marcus pressed. Vera will be transferred to the Western Coalition's custody, Dane said. They have facilities designed to hold practitioners who violated fundamental laws. She'll face trial there. Why not handle it ourselves? Marcus demanded. Because we don't have the resources to safely contain someone with her knowledge. And because this pack has been through enough. We need to heal, not spend months locked in legal proceedings. The logic was sound, and slowly the council members nodded agreement. Marcus looked dissatisfied but didn't push further. As the meeting dissolved into smaller conversations, Rowan approached Sable and Dane. He looked better than he had in weeks, clearer, more present. I owe you both an apology, he said, a real one, for being blind to what Clara was doing, for not fighting the spell harder, for— Stop, Sable said gently. You were being magically controlled. None of that was your fault. Maybe not, but I still made choices that hurt you. Rowan looked at Dane. And I understand now why you bonded with Sable. It wasn't manipulation. It was survival. Both of you choosing to protect each other when nobody else would. That's exactly what it was, Dane agreed. Rowan managed a smile, small and sad, but genuine. Take care of her and the baby. They deserve better than I could have given them. They deserve the world, Dane said quietly. I'll make sure they get it. Rowan left, and Sable felt a door close on that chapter of her life. No anger, no bitterness, just the quiet acceptance that some things couldn't be fixed, only survived. Over the following weeks, Thornridge began to heal. Clara was assigned to work with Vera Stone in the medical cabin, learning to treat injuries and illnesses under close supervision. It would take years for her to rebuild trust, but the opportunity existed. Vera Cross was transferred west under heavy guard. Sable watched the convoy leave and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, just tiredness and the desire to move forward. The curse, broken when the power anchor shattered, dissolved completely under Mara's careful dismantling. The witch stayed in Thornridge for a month, teaching Vera Stone basic magical healing and leaving behind protective wards that would warn of similar threats. You've got potential, Mara told Sable during their final conversation. That resistance to compulsion magic is rare. If you ever want to learn to use it actively, find me. I'll think about it, Sable said. Mara smiled. Good. The world needs people who can't be controlled, especially in packs like this one. As spring turned towards summer, Sable's pregnancy became obvious. Her body changed in ways that were both terrifying and miraculous. The subtle swell of her stomach growing more pronounced, movements inside her that felt like butterfly wings at first, then stronger, more insistent kicks. Dane was unexpectedly attentive. He didn't hover, didn't try to control, but he noticed things. When she was tired, when she needed help reaching something, when the pack's politics were wearing her down. He adjusted his schedule to accommodate her needs without making it obvious. One evening, Sable found him in his office staring at a small wooden cradle he'd been building. It's beautiful, she said from the doorway. Dane looked up, startled. It's not finished. I'm terrible at this kind of detail work. Can I help? He hesitated, then nodded. They worked together in comfortable silence, sanding rough edges and fitting pieces together. It wasn't perfect, the joints were slightly uneven, and the finish had a few imperfections, but it was sturdy and made with care. I've been thinking, Dane said as they worked, about what happens after the baby's born, about how we make this work long term. And I think we need to stop pretending this bond is purely transactional. He set down his tools, meeting her eyes. I'm not capable of the kind of love you had with Rowan, the kind that burns bright and makes everything feel possible. Vera took that from me, and I don't think it's coming back. Sable's chest tightened, but she stayed quiet, letting him finish. But I can offer something different, partnership, respect. Someone who sees you as an equal, not a prize or a responsibility. Dane's expression was more open than she'd ever seen it. I care about you, Sable. Not the way poets write about, but in a way that's real and steady and won't disappear when things get hard. Is that enough? Sable thought about what she'd wanted from Rowan, passion, romance, the fantasy of perfect love, and she thought about what she'd actually needed. Protection, stability, someone who wouldn't abandon her when life got complicated. It's more than enough, she said honestly, because I don't need perfect. I need real. And this, us, is the most real thing I've ever had. Dane reached across the cradle and took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, grounding. Then we build from here, he said, together. The baby arrived on a hot August night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Vera Stone delivered her, a daughter, small but healthy, with Sable's dark hair and eyes that would probably shift color as she grew. Dane was there for all of it, holding Sable's hand through the worst contractions. His presence steady even when she screamed threats about what she'd do to him for getting her into this situation. When Vera finally placed the baby in Sable's arms, his expression cracked open with something that looked like wonder. She's perfect, he whispered. She's wrinkly and covered in goo, Sable corrected, but her voice was thick with emotion. Perfect, Dane repeated firmly. They named her Vera Elaine Thornridge. Vera for Dane's healer who'd brought her safely into the world, Elaine for Sable's mother, who'd died in a storm 15 years ago. It was a name that carried weight and memory and hope all at once. The pack celebrated the birth with a gathering that lasted 3 days. People brought gifts, hand-carved toys, soft blankets, offers of help with childcare. Even Marcus Vale showed up with a stuffed wolf he claimed his granddaughter had made. She's Pack, Marcus said gruffly when Sable thanked him. That means something. Rowan came by one afternoon asking permission to visit. Sable agreed, curious and slightly nervous about how she'd feel seeing him hold the baby that was genetically his. But when Rowan cradled little Vera, his expression was gentle and sad and accepting all at once. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "You're both going to be amazing parents." "Thank you," Sable said. "I mean it." Rowan carefully handed the baby back. "I know she's not mine, not in any way that matters. But if either of you ever need anything, if she ever needs anything, I'm here, as pack, as family, whatever you need." It was the most mature thing Sable had ever heard him say. Maybe they'd all grown up a little in the past 6 months. Clara visited too, under supervision. She'd lost weight, and her eyes carried a permanent sadness that might never fully heal. "I know I don't deserve to see her," Clara said, standing awkwardly near the door. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry, for everything, and that I'm glad you're okay. Both of you." "I'm not ready to forgive you yet," Sable said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not yet." "I understand." Clara wiped her eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm working on it, being better. Vera Stone says I have potential as a healer. Maybe I can use that to make up for some of what I did." "Maybe," Sable agreed. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. 6 months after Vera Elaine's birth, Dane called another pack gathering. This one was different, celebratory rather than crisis-driven. The entire settlement turned out, curious about what the Alpha had planned. Dane stood on the platform with Sable beside him, the baby secured in a wrap against her chest. Around them, pack members waited with expectant faces. 15 years ago, Dane began, I became Alpha under terrible circumstances. I was grieving, angry, and convinced that shutting down emotion was the only way to survive. I banned magic because I'd seen it used to hurt people. I refused to bond because I couldn't imagine trusting anyone again. And I built Thornridge into something strong but isolated. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. I was wrong. Not about everything. The pack is strong, and we've survived challenges that would have destroyed weaker groups. But I was wrong to think that strength meant shutting out anything I couldn't control. Wrong to believe that grief should define every decision. Wrong to think that being Alpha meant being alone. Dane turned to Sable, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Sable Arden came into my life at the exact moment I needed her most, though neither of us knew it at the time. She proposed a bond out of desperation, and I accepted out of practicality. But what we've built since then is something neither of us expected, a partnership based on honesty, respect, and the understanding that perfection is impossible and unnecessary. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 circlets made of woven silver and dark metal, pack tradition for formal mate bonds that transcended legal arrangements. These represent a choice, Dane said. Not the choice we made 6 months ago out of necessity, but the choice we're making now out of genuine commitment. Sable, you've proven yourself as a hunter, a mother, and a leader in ways I never anticipated. You've challenged me, supported me, and refused to let me retreat into isolation. I'm asking you now, in front of the entire pack, to be my true mate, not just in law, but in every way that matters. Sable's throat tightened. Around them, the pack had gone completely silent. Yes, she said, her voice carrying clearly. I accept. Dane slipped 1 circlet onto her wrist, and she did the same for him. The metal was warm against her skin, solid and real. The pack erupted in cheers. People surged forward, Clara crying openly in the back, Kyle grinning like an idiot, Vera Stone beaming with pride. Even Marcus Vale was applauding, though he tried to hide it. As the celebration swirled around them, Dane leaned close and whispered, Thank you for choosing this, for choosing us. Thank you for being worth choosing, Sable whispered back. They stood together on the platform, Alpha and mate, broken people who'd found wholeness in the most unlikely partnership, while their pack celebrated around them and their daughter slept peacefully against Sable's chest. It wasn't the ending Sable had imagined 6 months ago. It was better, because it was real. That night, after the celebration had finally wound down, and little Vera was asleep in her imperfect cradle, Sable stood at the window of Dane's house looking out at the settlement. Lights glowed in windows across the territory. Somewhere, people were laughing. Somewhere else, someone was probably arguing. life continuing in all its messy, complicated glory. Dane came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist carefully, mindful of her still recovering body. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we've come, how much has changed. Any regrets?" Sable thought about it seriously. About Rowan and the love they'd lost. About Clara's betrayal. About the curse that had nearly killed them both. About becoming a mother before she felt ready. Bonding with a man she barely knew, surviving attacks both magical and emotional. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. Just gratitude that we made it through." "We make a good team," Dane said. "We make a weird team, but yeah, it works." He laughed. A genuine, warm sound she heard so rarely it felt like a gift. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their pack settle into sleep. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Another answered, the old language of their kind, speaking of territory and family and belonging. Sable's wolf stirred contentedly inside her, recognizing home. Not the home she'd planned, not the home she'd imagined, but home nonetheless. And in the end, that was all anyone could really ask for. A place to belong, people to protect, and the courage to keep fighting for both even when everything seemed impossible. Sable Arden had survived being cast out, manipulated, cursed, and nearly killed. She'd made impossible choices and gambled with her life and won against odds that should have destroyed her. She wasn't the woman she'd been 6 months ago. She was stronger, harder in some ways, softer in others. She was a mother, a mate, a fighter who'd proven herself when it mattered most, and she was done apologizing for any of it. The pack had doubted her, questioned her, suspected her of manipulation and scheming, but she'd stood before them bloodied and pregnant and unbroken, and she'd helped bring down the real enemy. Now they looked at her differently. With respect, with acceptance, with the understanding that she'd earned her place not through luck or schemes, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. "Come to bed," Dane said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Tomorrow's always a long day." "True, but we face it together." Sable turned in his arms and kissed him, not with passion, but with profound gratitude and affection, and the kind of love that built slowly over shared struggles instead of burning bright and fast. "Together," she agreed. They checked on Vera Elaine one last time, the baby sleeping peacefully, one tiny fist curled near her face, then retreated to their own room. Outside, the settlement slept. The forest whispered. The stars turned overhead in their endless patterns. And in Dane Thornridge's house, two broken people lay down together and dreamed of better tomorrows, knowing they'd fight for them when they came. Because that's what survivors did. They endured. They adapted. They built something new from the wreckage of what was lost. And sometimes, if they were very lucky, they found others who understood that strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about breaking and choosing to stand back up anyway, again and again and again, until standing became second nature, until the scars became stories worth telling, until the pain transformed into wisdom, until survival became victory, and victory became life.